There is. So good morning, everybody. Sorry, we're just chatting. George, you know what? I had told George our class is from 10 to 12 for the 2 hours. That's what we're doing this year. So you might be a little late, later than what we were talking about. So my name is Susan M. Hart Servideo. I am the a coordinator here in Ocean County, and Diane Larson is here with us from Monmouth County for my master gardeners that don't know Diane. So welcome. I can't put the fans on any higher because you'll be blown away. This is the middle of the road. So I appreciate y'all making the trip out, and I know what you have a couple of people for our group is online at the moment. So we want to welcome everybody. There's coffee will be in about 10 minutes. So, oh, it's out. Okay, sorry, it's ready to go. So if anybody's ready for some coffee, we don't usually do hot. We used to years ago, but it just got to be so much in all the food. And then what do you do? Oh, so we stopped, but we knew you guys were coming. So, and I know you guys have it. I know you guys have it. So I said, well, we're going to bring it to you. So we'll be bringing some stuff to your place whenever we come up for urban forestry. Just welcome. I just really, we try to do it a little bit, not just to thank the speakers, but so you guys can kind of meet other master gardeners, and other programs are a little different. We also right now are running differently than each other. So, what we do here in Ocean is different than Monmouth and vice versa. So, it's just kind of nice to see sometimes, and we can't always do the same thing, but we we try. What was the other thing I was going to say? Please turn off your cell phones. Put them on silent, please. You guys are in your third class, so I understand. Our master gardeners, our class is halfway through. So we do it 2 days a week, and we're doing, we started in January. Yeah, so I know. So you guys are getting pesticides early, whereas our group is kind of getting them in the middle. Now, I know it doesn't matter any of my master gardeners or Monmouth County, anybody have any particular questions? Because we're all kind of, I'm basically Diane. So I do the horticulture too with Patty Dixon, who was up here, but she has walked away. Patty Dixon is our other horticulturist in the office. We do have two. We are lucky enough to have two. We get a lot of things. We do ticks. I know some of you guys, we do tick ID here in Ocean County. If anybody, yep, Leon, you good? There's probably can come up here if you want, or you could have whichever you. We have, if anybody, if Diane, I'm always free if you ever want me to come up and do a class for you. Yeah. For Monmouth County about tick ID and what we're not medical. So we really just look and give them an ID so that they know what to be, I guess, cognizant of what issues could happen depending on what type of tick it is. Not every tick could possibly carry a disease, but not everyone carries Lyme. But Lyme is still the biggest one. And in Monmouth County.
Our master gardeners don't identify.
No, I know. I know. Yeah, I knew that. I was just saying that's something that's different in our group.
You have a lot more ticks down here.
They're just coming in. That's just, we're actually we had 2 ticks come in yesterday. Somebody dropped one off last night, but it was a carpet beetle. So we get the dreaded lint bug. You'll hear about that a lot as you're coming in. People, can't see as well or think it's got legs and it's moving because of static, but we will get lint bugs. And they are just lints. So a lot of times Patty and myself, we have to actually, and I'm sure Diane, you do too, sometimes you have to take a picture under the microscope because they don't believe you. Oh no, it's moving. It moved. It's not. It's dead. It's not living. It's lint. So we do get a lot of that. We do right this time of the year. We'll be getting a lot of carpet beetles. The other thing we're getting down here is swarmers. The ant swarmers and termite swarmers are out right now looking for new places. Yeah, we're seeing that here because of the warmth. The rain yesterday is not helping either.
We got a lot of ladybug calls.
Oh, we do get those.
Couple of weeks.
Okay.
We haven't had it in years.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot of box, oh, but yeah, the box elder, usually that's a fall thing for us down here. Obviously weeds, you kind of saw what was here. I'm sure y'all have them in your gardens too. Bittercress, hairy bittercress, the one little one that does the white flowers. And then once the seeds get up high enough, it goes everywhere. It is an annual. Take your hoe or your rake and just scratch them out.
But I went out on Sunday, this was beautiful, and I started pulling my
Yeah.
bittercress. And I looked up and there's like 3 honeybees on the flowers. I felt so guilty. I'm like, go ahead. I walked away.
I like, yeah, yeah. It gets to a point, you just try not to let them get too big because then they go to seed and then you kind of killed the point of taking them out. And the other thing we tend to have down here, purple dead nettle is out right now. That's the stuff that has like a pinkish tinge to it, and then the pretty flowers come out in May. It's so pretty. The bees do love it. It's in the mint family, but it's a perennial. So that is not something you just scratch to get up. You do actually have to go and pull that one out. Trying to use less chemicals. I know that's always something we kind of try to say for no matter what group you're in. Yeah, we're gonna leave the windows open as long as we can. It might get noisy once traffic gets a little crazy. So if it gets bad for you guys to hear back there, George will have a microphone. I'm just loud, so. I don't mind talking. As my group knows, Diane knows. Is there any, I know you guys are just starting. Is there any questions that we'll do personal gardens? Questions? Anybody online? Kelly?
No questions, but just questions asked from the floor, please.
So, as Peggy is trying to tell me, if there's questions, whoever we'll tell George too when he comes, that, to repeat the question, because not everybody can hear from back there to over, like if Peggy, you guys couldn't hear Peggy, she was just saying to repeat the questions, so that everybody can hear. And we did say, tell her, turn off the phones for anybody new that hasn't come in or has come in. Restrooms, help yourself. After, we'll have a little break once, usually, depending on what George's talks like around 11-ish, 11:15. You're welcome to get up and move around. Just try to be careful and quiet if we can. I know how that works. When you have a group of people and somebody's like, other than that, I don't know, Diane, do you have anything, else coming
Well,
up?
I passed the Bodie's, they're opening today, so
Oh.
if anyone's going home on Route 70, today's opening day.
Route 70, today's opening day for Lavodi's, so traffic is probably gonna be crap. And
It's buzz.
70, yeah, I was gonna say 70 is tough.
No, it's grocery.
Lavodi's, apparently it's a grocery store. I don't know, I'm a. Yeah, I'm not. Oh, you could be one of that. No, it's not a garden center. It's not a garden center. They might have plants though. Yes.
What is the vote?
So we were just saying Lavodi's is a grocery store. I'm actually from Manahawkin, the LBI area, so I have no, I have no idea what Lavodi's was either, but somebody else mentioned. Do you have a question? Oh, no, just yeah,
If any of Monmouth County will have their quiz.
all right, so Monmouth County, if you have quizzes. Anybody from Monmouth County that does not have a handout? Because our group has their handout with their name tag. We kind of keep them all together. Okay, so Diane's coming around for those. Diane, do you do a diagnostics class?
Well, we do have. It's supposed to be just there, diagnostic.
Yeah.
And, then on our health line training, we'll talk about that. That's like the last.
I'm trying to think if I had anything quick to pop up.
What else?
Of course, I have the wrong stick up here.
You got a lot of bed bugs. You guys identify bed bugs?
We do identify bed bugs.
Ooh, that's fun.
We don't get many. We do get them, but we don't get many.
Yeah, we get the, health department bringing them in.
Okay. So their health department brings in the bed bugs for them to identify. We do get them from time to time. Sometimes, most of the time, it's not from homeowners. It's usually some kind of a visit. Hell yeah. Renters, yep, you guys, you're full, right? Okay. Lily, you good? Okay. If we need any more seats, let us know. We have a couple of, not tables, but I have little stands if there's anybody that, needs one. So what else? Let's see. What else? How can I kill 20 minutes? No, just,
Oh, can I give it?
yes. Okay. Cheryl Clear is going to give an update for our master gardeners.
For those in Ocean County who were here on Tuesday and we did the seed demo.
Oh, yeah.
We have a basil that has germinated already.
So we did a vegetables class of talking about seed starting, and also how to start a vegetable bed. And they just did it on Tuesday, and we already have a little basil that's popped up. So that's unusual to be that early. But so, yeah, we have our little, yeah,
Yes.
the Promix is what we use. So, all right, how about, oh, what do you got, Diane?
All right, so there's little swellings on these stems. All right, so take a look. So if somebody brought these in, what's the first thing you would ask them?
The people online?
What trees? Where'd you get it off of? So it turns out it's an Amelanchier, a service berry.
Serviceberry, okay.
That's in the rose family. And, so you see the swellings on it. Those actually happened last year, and that's actually a fungus. It's rust. So, it'll get the rust on the leaves, but it also gets on the stem. And it causes that swelling, and that's probably gonna girdle and kill it from that point out eventually.
So they say to prune about what, 6 inches? Usually
Below
back?
it,
Below it.
and disinfect your blade in between cuts if you could transmit that pathogen. You know, they get it every year, so.
It's either, we don't see as, okay, we do see it from time to time here. We definitely have much more rust
Here's
on
one.
the cedar juniper rust.
Yeah.
Or cedar apple.
It's similar.
It's very, yeah, it's in the same family.
They said it was a form of, but like more rain or.
Sorry, what was the question?
Well, remember these triangles, like this is Amelanchier, this is something that they get. So the pathogen has to get to be there. They have to have a susceptible host, which is that, and yes. What did we say about fungus? What makes it worse every year? Cool, wet spring. So if we have a cool, wet spring, we're gonna see this worse. You can put a preventive fungicide on it, or you could keep cutting it out. If you have a sprinkler system, make sure it doesn't hit the tree. So it stays, keeps it as.
Probably gonna always have some form of it,
Right.
but
Prune
How bad?
it, get good airflow through it.
Is that, I didn't know if you named it, was that Quince apple rust?
There's quince apple rust, there's cedar apple rust, it probably quince.
I was.
I was gonna say, yeah, either quince or apple, because it's in the rose family, and the apple is actually mallow
They're all
and rose.
similar.
But they can also get cedar apple rust, is my question. Because I was talking to the gentleman who was speaking to us about,
Buckwheat,
yeah, and he said that it was quince.
it's probably quince, but the treatment's the same for all, right?
So quince, yep, sorry, I'm coming up. Quince, we were talking about that, it may be quince apple, quince cedar rust versus quince apple. It's again, a two host. So it doesn't matter that the treatment still would be the same. Cut it out if you can when it's young. It's very similar to, well, it's different because it's a rust versus a black knot. We'll see the black knot in cherry cheese right now. We're seeing a lot of that come through.
Right. You won't see black knot on
On the
serviceberry.
serviceberry.
It's only on cherries, mostly those purple leaf plums.
Yep, plums and cherries, things in that family. Yep, yeah, that. So we're putting that, George, you get a grand entrance. Come on in, take yourself, okay, come in, get yourself settled. You're fine. I said,
George has been very busy. Is it fun?
yeah.
We had, at Monmouth County yesterday, we had the Central Jersey Turf and Ornamental Institute.
Go settle.
So we have it every year for landscape professionals, and that's the way they get all their pesticide credits basically for the year. So George, was there yesterday speaking to about 100 landscapers on pesticide safety. We had.
He's a bit
Steve-
parched, so he's
Yeah.
grabbing something
Well,
first.
yeah, he had a busy couple days. He's done a lot of talking. We had, Rich, or Steve Recky was speaking on, new emerging pests. We had somebody from Turf Terra, a company. And if anybody sat in on the Helpline Roundtable yesterday, I talked about neonicotinoids being off the market now, and that's the most popular insecticide out there.
I'm used to
So as of October 31st, it got pulled because it's a threat to pollinators. So now the landscapers are freaking out. What am I gonna use? So they gave a good information. It's a BT product that they're selling for Japanese beetle grubs and adults.
Is that banned everywhere or just New Jersey?
New Jersey, that's a New Jersey law right now. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. So, good morning. We have this in case we need it for back there, but we do have a clip on for George. I turn that one off for the moment. George, I'll get you settled.
Okay.
So, yeah, keep them, otherwise we'll move around too. Yep. See you there. Good to see you. I know. So everybody wanted to introduce George Hamilton. As you can see, Dr. George Hamilton, excuse me, because I don't,
Oh, no problem.
you know, that would took a lot to get that. So, yeah, you're good anywhere in this area and this is your clicker. All right, and then we break whenever you feel like, or whenever you're ready to.
Okay.
All right, everybody? All right. Oh, I'll take that.
All right. Good morning. I apologize. My newbie said I should have been here at 9 o'clock. I hit at 9 o'clock. I hit Hopewell. I don't know. So, let me just say something about the product, BT product that's out there for grub control. I'm not quite sure it's as good as what they say it is. So at the meeting yesterday, I actually learned about it for the first time. And as an entomologist, I'd never heard of it before. So I actually went, and when I got back to my office and took a look at it. And yes, it's supposed to be effective against the adults, somewhat effective against the grubs. So I'm not sure, but what I'm just gonna mention that I need to go and do more research on it, yeah.
Adults or grubs of what?
Japanese beetle,
Okay, thanks.
okay? And it's also labeled for oriental beetle, mass chafers, basically any of the white grubs that are in the turf, okay? And the nice thing about it, if it is as effective as it's supposed to be, is the adult Japanese beetles. For oriental beetle, you don't have to worry about the adults. They don't feed on plants to any extent. All right, so normally my assistant, I should say my colleague, Pat Hastings, comes down and gives this talk. And she does a lot of pesticide safety and regulations, because from what I understand, you usually have somewhat of a mixed group of people sometimes. No, you don't. Okay, a lot of the other master gardener groups that she talks to do. And so I decided to take a little bit of a different tact and update a presentation that I gave to this class maybe 20 years ago. That's how long it's been since I've been down here, I think, to talk to you folks. And the title of that was Pesticides 101. And so I'm going to start just talking about things like what a pesticide is, what a pesticide isn't. There are lots of misconceptions out there. I'll just say right now, my favorite one, the press, is everything they say and everything they write is pesticides and herbicides. Herbicides are legally considered pesticides. The press and other people get it wrong because they think just because it kills plants, it's not a pesticide, and it is. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And so what are pesticides? These are the things that I'm going to talk about, and I have some other things to talk about as well. We're going to talk about the description of a pesticide. I'm going to give you a definition. We're going to talk about the different types of pesticides. We're going to talk a little bit about their activity, their significance, because they are important in a lot of different systems as long as we use them correctly. Okay. There are issues. I'm going to touch on some of the issues with these materials as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about where we are today And we're gonna talk a little bit about user risk. Now, that's actually what Pat usually talks about for the whole 2 hours a month. It's only a small subset of what I'm gonna talk about today. So what is a pest? It's basically any unwanted organism, okay? A plant, an animal, microorganisms, okay? So products like Xanaflush could be considered a pesticide. About that. So what's a pesticide then? This is the definition that EPA uses. This is the definition that DEP uses to define what a pesticide is. It's actually part of a law called the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act. We call it FIFRA, and this is the definition that it uses. It's basically any material, either natural or synthetic, that is used to kill, repel, or modify the action or behavior of a usually unwanted organism. Okay, and most people figure, you know what kill means, okay? And where you are here in Ocean County, I'm sure you know what repellents are because of things like ticks and whatnot. And I'll just say, if you don't use repellents when you're out in the woods for ticks, please do. The possibility of getting Lyme disease is huge. I know from personal experience, I managed to escape it for 40 years. And the one time last year I didn't wear it, I got bit and I came down with Lyme disease. So please, wear those repellents. Natural versus synthetic. Are there differences here? Can anybody tell me what an organic insecticide is?
Like this, peppermint oil.
I'm sorry?
Peppermint oil?
Peppermint oil? Possibly. I don't think I think that's actually possibly exempt from being registered as a pesticide because it's, I think, one of the materials that's a natural type material. There's a special list, section 24 of FIFRA. I don't know that. There's a whole lot of things. Capsicum is on there. D-limonene is on that list, and they're exempt from being registered as a pesticide.
I was gonna say lavender.
Lavender, no. Okay, so my students make the same mistake. An organic insecticide is any insecticide that has carbon in its molecule. Okay, technically speaking, from a chemical standpoint. Now, the reason I've got native versus synthetic up here is just for that reason. When we talk about native and when I talk about organic, I'm talking about things that come from plants, okay? And so the possible answer to, we're not actually wrong, but I prefer to call them natural pesticides as opposed to organic pesticides. It's confusing. I wish in the beginning they had done this instead of calling them all organic. So does it mean that I just covered that? Is natural better or less toxic? Anybody want to try to take a guess at that? Yes, I heard not necessarily. Yes, good. And that's because some of the organic materials are actually as toxic or more toxic than the synthetic materials. And so a good example of that, which unfortunately is no longer around, except for use by Fish and Wildlife to kill fish in lakes and streams if they want to repopulate, is rodenone. It was one of the best of the organic, the natural insecticides for killing all sorts of things. Unfortunately, it's no longer on the label, but it had an effective dose of 0.8 milligrams. That's more toxic than any of the materials we have, except for some of the punitive type materials. So, being natural doesn't mean it's less toxic all of the time. So, kill insecticides. Yes.
I'm sorry, are you equating the term natural with organic?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I prefer to use, I slip back and use organic because I also talk to them as well, but I try to use natural. They're basically the same thing. Okay. So in terms of kill, we know insects kill insects, okay? That's what they're designed to do. And I have some examples here. Hopefully you haven't run into any of these, but people most commonly know what this is. Okay, that's an American cockroach. And we have other types of cockroaches. They get into our structures. If you have hemlock, this is a picture of hemlock woolly adelgid. Okay, another insect that's a pest. This is a looper, cabbage looper. It's a caterpillar of a moth. And then, how many of you brought flour or grain products home from the store? And all of a sudden you have a bunch of beetles running around. Okay, so this is one of those grain beetles. That's very easy to take care of when you bring things home, put it all in either glass or plastic containers. And if you have them, it's not an example of you have an unclean house because it came from the store. And ultimately it came from the warehouse where they keep it from. And they're real easy to get rid of as long as you keep stuff in glass or plastic containers. Everybody pretty much knows what a fungicide is. Those are materials that are designed to prevent plant diseases from occurring. We don't have a lot of products in the fungicides that we can use to go and kill or knock out a problem that is occurring. Most of them are used as protectants. So you get the right kind of conditions to make an application to protect the plant so that it doesn't become infected. And so this is a picture of eggplant, and this is what verticillium wilt does to eggplant, and that's the beginning symptoms of that. And the only way at this point to do anything about it is just pull the plant out and destroy it. Okay. And that's a lot of what we do with fungicides in all sorts of different situations. Herbicides, things that are designed to kill plants, and I've got milkweed here, although I would only suggest doing this in an agricultural field. As an entomologist, I like to see the milkweed because of monarch butterfly. Okay. And that's another thing that I was reading about that I have to look at further. That BT that we mentioned may also have impacts on Lepidoptera and the monarch butterflies because it's a strain, Taxon galleria, which is the species name for wax moth. So it does kill Lepidoptera. And again, I got to go look at that further. Rodenticides, okay, things that are designed to kill these two organisms. We have a lot of different rodents. These are the only two products that are designed to kill rats and mice. Does anybody know what one of the more common active ingredients is in the
Coumadin?
coumadin? Good. Does everybody know what coumadin is? It's a blood thinner, right? And so when they ingest the bait that you give them, they eventually take up a toxic dose and they bleed to death internally. Okay. But guess what? Humans take coumadin too. So you have problems with blood clots, you have to take coumadin to keep that from occurring. It's exactly the same material. We take it at a much lower dose. Okay, and so this is an example of a product that is in one situation regulated as though it's a drug, which is a completely different set of regulations. And for another use, it is regulated as a pesticide. There are others. Then can anybody tell me what the active ingredient is for the Quell shampoo that we use to control head lice? No, it's not pyrethrin, but you're close. It's a synthetic version. It has a pyrethroid in it. It's permethrin. Prior to that, it was the active ingredient was lindane. And
Wow.
yeah, right, exactly. But at a much lower dose than what we used in, say, controlling dogwood borers in our landscape for so they don't kill the trees.
Why would it only kill rats and mice and not like chipmunks or rabbits?
Oh,
on the
it will
roads?
kill rabbits, it'll kill chipmunks, it'll kill groundhogs, it'll kill anything that eats the bait. And so actually, if they use it indoors, I don't believe they, well, yeah, they probably use it outdoors, but it's in actual special containers. So other things can't get there.
Oh,
So it's not a matter of it won't kill them, it's a matter of it's not labeled use against them. Which a lot of people don't understand, because they want to use it with squirrels, get it in their attics, and that's actually an illegal use of material.
Question, can you repeat questions once they're asked, please? Repeat questions once they're asked, whatever.
Oh, I'm sorry,
That's okay.
I forgot about the people online. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, if a mouse or a rat dies of a roadside, if something else eats it, will it also die?
Probably not.
I was heard with owls that you had to be,
Okay, well, all right, outdoors?
yes.
Yeah,
outdoors.
okay, outdoors. So the question is, if a rat or a mouse feeds on the cumin material and dies, if something else eats it, will that be a problem? I would say it's a possibility, okay? And that is not a new thing. We've seen that with other types of materials. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, there were some people in Chesapeake Bay area that were using an insecticide in baiting dead carcasses, putting it out to control coyotes in the area. And it was good against the coyotes, but it was also good against the bald eagles that also were feeding on the carcasses. And so there was a big deal about that, and that was part of the reason why they took the insecticide off the market, because people were using it illegally. So that's a possibility. Now, inside a house, I was thinking ants would come, and probably not, okay, because they're not designed, it's not designed to kill insects. How about any others? Anybody else give me any other type of pesticide? Yes.
Clorox?
Clorox, okay, you're way ahead of me.
I know, sorry. I had to say it.
That's fine, yeah, I might as well just tell you. So the answer, if you didn't hear online, was Clorox. Clorox is a registered pesticide. We buy it because we think it's going to make our clothing white, okay, and get rid of stains. If you're in food service, you use sodium hypochlorite, which is what Clorox is, to wash all the metal surfaces to sterilize it. Some of our growers here in New Jersey also use it in their water baths that they use to clean their vegetables when they come in, because it surface sterilizes the vegetables. So when they put it in storage, it lasts longer because the raw organisms have been removed. And if you look at it, the easiest way that you can tell is it has an EPA registration number on it. It says EPA, REG, and then a number. Anything you see that on, that means it's a registered pesticide. So there are other things. Yes, absolutely. Yes, it is. And actually, okay, again,
Yep.
the question was, is BT a registered pesticide? And the answer is yes. So is things like neem, so our pyrethrin products, many of the natural product materials are also registered pesticides. Again, there's some that are exempt, and it's a very limited use, but the ones that you would walk into a garden center and buy, those are going to be registered pesticides.
What about vinegar?
Vinegar, that depends on the level. Okay, the question was, what about vinegar? Yeah, actually, you can buy vinegar in concentrations high enough to kill weeds. It has to be more than 20%. And those products would have an EPA registration number, I believe, today. Now, taking what you use for cooking and trying to kill weeds with it, not going to work. It's not strong enough. Okay, but yeah, that's a natural fungicide. I think organic folks can use that. It depends though, it has to be Armory certified, which is a special group that looks at all the things they want to use. And it's not only just what the active ingredient is, it's what the inner ingredients are, how they process it, okay? We have a product called, spinosad. It's a natural product. And initially, they had one formulation for the organic folks and had one for the commercial folks. And they realized that, we only need one because they're exactly the same. There's just a little difference in how one is made versus the other. And so all the product now is Army certified, and so you can use it conventionally. And that's what they use to control European corn borer that gets into peppers here in the state and other parts of the country. Okay, so this is a zebra mussel. Anybody hear of the zebra mussel? Yeah, if you live in the Great Lakes, you know all about zebra mussel that got introduced into the Great Lakes through the St. Lawrence Seaway. It clogs up all kinds of things. We have products that are designed to kill zebra mussel. Molluscicides. Now, most people know of molluscicides because of the snail geta or slug geta. Okay, that's the mollusk that we're familiar with. Those are registered pesticides. They're molluscicides. We also have products that are called pesticides. That's what the scientific name is for a fish. And so this is a snakefish. Got introduced into Maryland about 15 years ago. It's from Asia. It eats all the other fish in the lake or the pond, and then it can move. It comes out of the water and goes someplace else. And so we have materials that are pesticides. Rotenone is a pesticide, okay? So not only kills insects, it kills fish. And as I think I already mentioned, that's the material that they use to clean all the fish out of a body of water when they want to repopulate it and rebalance the community, the fish community in the lake.
Right.
Yes.
Just because it's a fish, it doesn't necessarily mean it's only gonna kill the snake fish. It could kill,
Oh, it'll
everything.
kill all the fish.
right, just to let you,
The snakefish is just my example.
that's fine.
Right, the same thing here, oh, this one's a little more. This one's a little more specific. Does anybody know what that is? It looks like an eel. It's closely related, it's a lamprey. So that's another one that got introduced into the Great Lakes. And it attaches to things like the salmon in the Great Lakes, and it will feed on them and eventually kill them. And so they do have programs in the states surrounding and in Canada where they introduce materials to kill these upstream, because they go upstream to spawn and breed. And they have programs where they treat it there, so they get the juveniles to try and control this. Repellents, things that, are gonna repel, usually insects, okay? The big one, of course, is mosquitoes, and also ticks. But in certain parts of the country, like New England, we're using repellents because of this insect, this is the black fly. And if you've ever been up in Maine, lower Maine in May around Memorial Day, you know about these because they swarm you in the hundreds. And when they bite, it bleeds. They're real nasty little flies. Here's my tick picture for a repellent. We do have deer repellents. I'm not gonna say anything about how well they work, but there are registered products out there that are designed just to repel deer, yes.
In the past, I believe I treated my hands and shirts with permethrin.
Yes.
And let it dry.
Okay, sure. So the question is about using permethrin as a repellent for ticks, and in this case, you were dipping clothing into permethrin.
Or you
So,
were spraying it. Or
Spray.
spray it. You apply it by spray.
well, but you were actually dipping it, or, okay, this is actually, so this is something I'm not familiar with. And so, you know, there could be a product that I don't know about that allows you to do that. So with the permethrin that's in the Permanone, or it's now called Repel. If you read the label, it says do not spray it on anything but your clothing. And it actually says to spray your clothing 24 hours before you're going to use it. And that's because of skin irritation problems. All of the pyrethroids, when they come in direct contact with skin, cause irritation, rashes, and so forth. And so I'm not saying that you can't do that, but you're hopefully doing it 24 hours ahead of time. Yeah, so that it's nice and dry, and then you can wear it. And you can also buy clothing that's already impregnated with the permethrin.
Yeah.
It's real popular in fishing, people that fish. Yes,
And hopefully it was the label said that you can do it as a dip versus a spray. That's always read the label instructions.
right, exactly, yeah. So yeah, it would be really hard to take a spray and try to dip clothing.
You'd be
You have to
surprised
if
what
you
people
can.
do.
Oh, no. Please, I have stories. Okay, how about modify the action or behavior of an unwanted organism? Can anybody give me an example of something that might do that? Okay, does everybody know what a pheromone is? Okay, good. So it's something we do with pheromones. It's also something we do with insect growth regulators. Okay, know what an insect growth regulator is? So those are materials that are designed to mess up the hormone systems in insects. And the most common one are what are called juvenile hormone mimics. A juvenile hormone, when it's at high levels in an insect, keeps it a juvenile, okay? And so we have a product that is out there commercially that you can use for things like flea control. And so it won't impact the adults, but it will. It's called methylbrine. And when you spray it and then the larvae come in contact with it, it keeps that level of juvenile hormone very high. And so they never go to the adult stage, and so there's no egg production, and eventually you'll get rid of the fleas. We have others. Insects have a hormone called ecdysone, which is what triggers them to molt. And we have products that we can spray insects with that interfere with that hormone's ability to cause them to molt. So what happens is they never molt, and they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And again, they never get to the adult stage, so we can knock out the population. Plant growth regulators, there are products out there that do similar types of things to plants. One of them, when I talk to landscapers, and they always chuckle, there's a product out there that you can spray grass, and it interferes with the growth of the grass. You don't have to mow so often. And of course, the landscapers laugh because a lot of them mow grass, and I hope they make money on it. Using things like golf course greens that they want to keep so they don't have to mow so often. We have other ones. Have any of you ever, buddies, I'm asking that. I'm assuming you have. How many of you have ever used Rootone? Okay, that's a plant hormone, IBA, because it causes increased root growth in the cuttings, right? Okay, well, we're changing the behavior of the plant, and so that makes that material actually a registered pesticide.
So I just wanted to share, we got a call yesterday, and I've gotten this before. This gentleman has a sweet gum tree, and he, you know, they have those sticky balls that fall all over the place. So what could he spray? Is there anything he could spray that would stop that from happening? And there is that Florel product. Have you?
I'm not familiar.
So it's a hormone that you spray when they're in bloom. And I think it affects the flowers so they don't form the.
Okay.
So, but my thought to him was, you know, how big is the tree? You're gonna have to hire somebody to spray the whole tree when it's in bloom. And you're better off hiring the kid down the street to rake them up once a week, you know?
I would agree with you. Of course, kids don't do that anymore.
Right.
That's how I made my money to go to the movies every week, was, you know, mowing lawns and raking leaves. So we have some other ones that farmers use. There was an old one, that went off the market in the eighties. It's called Alor, that, the fruit growers, the apple growers would spray their trees with, and it would keep the fruit from falling, so that they got bigger and redder. And, they were trying with Red Delicious to compete with, Washington State. Okay, because ours were really little and they're huge. And, there's another one that I think our peach growers still use down in South Jersey called Ethereal. And basically what it did was it delayed bloom. Okay. And the reason for it was the growers down in South Jersey, especially in the last few springs, when it's gotten 80 degrees in March and their trees bloom. And then we get a cold snap and all the flowers fall off. Okay, so it's designed to delay bloom so that they get past that critical stage there, so that they can get a crop. We have things that we use called desiccants. Potato growers, we do still have some potato growers here in the state. When they are ready to start digging, they use products that are designed to kill the vines. And then they go and dig, and those are very simple pesticides. Pheromones, yes.
What do you think of diatomaceous earth?
Okay, the question is, what do I think of diatomaceous earth? Given the right situation, it's an effective material. Okay, so that works because the insect comes in contact with it. It's abrasive, and insects have an outer layer of wax, which is there to keep them from dehydrating, and it interferes with it. It basically, you know, removes it, and then they desiccate, and that's how it works. So yeah, it won't work probably for everything, but the things that, you know, it does work. Okay, and there are situations where we do recommend that. So pheromones are materials that are designed in terms of insects for them to communicate within a species, okay? And so the most common one that people are aware of when you watch National Geographic and you see all the ants, and if you have Disney Channel, there's actually a thing on insects, and one of them is all about those ants. When they go to a food source, they put down a trail of chemicals, and that they come back from the food source, they use it to go back to the nest, tell it, and then they tell everybody else, hey, I found this really good food source, and then the other ants follow the trail to the food source and then follow it back. In agriculture and in some circumstances in the landscape, we have taken that pheromone, the one that's a sex pheromone, that the females release to attract males to them for mating purposes, and we put it in a trap. And we use that to monitor their populations, and when they get to a certain level, we know that it's time to do something, spray an insecticide or whatever it is that you're going to do. When we use it in that trap, it's not considered to be a pesticide, because the male thinks he's finding a female, and so he's not changing his behavior, okay? And it just gets there, instead of a female, it's a sticky trap, and he gets caught and he dies. But we can also use that for what's called mating disruption, okay? And there is a product that is effective against the oriental beetle to do this. And what we do is we flood the area with the pheromone. And you have this great big cloud, and the males find females by following concentration gradients to a point source. They can't do that in the cloud, okay? And so the way I describe it to my students, and when I talk to landscapers about this, think of a small room with a bunch of people in it, and somebody's got too much perfume or cologne on. Everybody smells it, but you can't really figure out who has too much on. It's the same idea. And so the males go into the cloud and they can't find a single female. And so there's no mating. Again, we don't have eggs and we shut down the population. And there are insects, is that peaches, blue moth, that's how our growers control it. They use the mating disruption, they don't have to use traditional insecticides. So this is just the example. Here's my male and he's finding that female following that concentration gradient. These are different types of dispensers for the pheromones that we use in the traps. And these are just basically different types of ways to slowly release the chemical into the environment. And so if you've ever bought any of these traps, they come in all kinds of different designs. Believe it or not, the design of the trap has an impact on the plume of chemical that comes out of it. And that has an impact on whether it's going to attract the insect to it. You may have seen this one. You may have seen this one. Those are traps that we would put pheromones in to monitor spongy moth populations. Everybody know what spongy moth is? Good, good, yeah. Entomology Society of America changed the name a couple of years ago from gypsy moth to spongy moth to be more inclusive. They're working more, they're working on more with that as well. The only pheromone trap that I would tell you not to use is a Japanese vagabond trap.
Really?
Hopefully everybody knows that.
I use it.
Okay,
I mean, it's a bag that's supposed
Right.
to attract Japanese people.
and how many beetles do you get in the trap? Lots of them, I'm sure.
So it's attracting them to my yard?
Yeah, so basically, if you use that trap and nobody else has it in your neighborhood, they're all coming to your house. Okay. And if you're in an area where we still have high populations of Japanese beetles, where I live, we used to, we don't anymore because they've been replaced by Oriental beetle, which has a similar thing. Their pheromones very attractive to them. There are problems in nurseries and you put pheromone traps up and you get thousands of them coming to the pheromone traps. Yeah,
At one time I used milky spore.
yes.
What is that?
Okay, milky spore is a naturally occurring bacteria that you put in the soil. So the question was, what is milky spore? And you have to seed it. And usually in a grid pattern, it's not a product that's gonna take care of the grubs immediately unless they, happen to blunder into it. But you're seeding it, and so eventually the bacteria spreads and it becomes effective. It's very hard to find. And we know it's out there. It's not something that I would probably recommend. Because the problem with it, it's not like BT. They can create all the BT they want to in fermenters. With the milky spore, you actually have to rear Japanese beetle by the thousands and infect them with the bacteria and then harvest the bacteria. And so there's always problems with limited supply and whether or not what's in there is actually going to work because of problems with the rearing. So,
It seemed to have worked. I mean, this was a long time ago,
Okay.
but it was on, like, we had a lot of grubs in our lawn.
okay.
And, spread it. I don't remember what it was in the spring or the fall and then.
It's probably just before July, because that's when they start to come out and lay new eggs, and so it would be there for the developing larvae to feed on. The only other problem with it is it's only effective against Japanese beetles. It's not effective against any of the other white grubs that are in the turf. So, and they don't have any strains that they commercially produce for the rest of them. So, okay. All right, and so here's the picture of the mating disruption. We've got the male. We put all these different dispensers here on the tree, and we would do this on probably most of the trees in the orchard. Again, there's so much chemical coming out here that males can't find the females, and so we shut down mating. Other types of materials. Let me, without looking at the handout, What do you think is the number one sold pesticide in the United States?
Roundup.
No, it's not Roundup. So they asked, the response was Roundup. Any other guesses? Clorox, that's a good one, but that's not the answer either. No, seven's not it.
Be gone?
No, Weed B Gone's not it. How many of you have heard of Lysol? Lysol is a registered pesticide, so it's Pine Sol and all the other disinfectants. And it makes sense, what are they designed to do? Kill germs, basically, they're germicides. And so they are registered with the EPA as pesticides, and so, yeah, Lysol's the answer there. Again, there are others, we've talked about Clorox, the sanitizers, disinfectants. When COVID hit, all the people in all the states in the US that do what Pat and I do had this big discussion about whether we should be training people to properly use disinfectants because they're a registered pesticide. Fortunately, we decided no, because there was no way we were going to be able to do that, but there was a discussion. The other one here that people don't think about are paints and stains that we use to paint our houses and stain our houses. There are products out there that have anti-mildew material, the algicides in them. That makes them a registered pesticide, and they have an EPA registration. So again, an example of things people wouldn't normally consider to be a pesticide. Unusual products. Everybody familiar with Skin So Soft? Avon sells it. I'm not doing a commercial for Avon. Does anybody remember about 20 years or so ago what they were saying about Avon? And Skin So Soft? The mosquito repellent? Yeah, okay, but who was actually saying it? No, it wasn't Avon. It wasn't Avon. It was everybody else. Yes, the public was selling the material for them. Because if they made any claims about it repelling insects, they would actually be fined by EPA for promoting an unregistered pesticide. Okay. Eventually, they did come out with a line that is basically the same material. They went through the process of getting it registered because they realized they can make a lot more money doing this. And so we've got the product over here that you can buy. And basically I'm not sure how well good it is against mosquitoes, but it is good against things like no-see-ums and little tiny biting flies.
Green flies.
Crane flies?
Green flies.
Green flies? I wouldn't use it against greenheads. It's probably not gonna work.
They do have a version that's called Bug Guard.
Okay,
That has IR 35 in it, so it's Skin So Soft with that,
Right.
and it's a good tick repellent. So for people, but I love that stuff I'm not trying to sell Avon either, but it's good for the no-see-ums. I get.
yeah, and I think they've got a couple of them that have the IR in.
Yeah, otherwise just the Skin So Soft is separate from
Right.
it. Yeah.
Right. So what happens is it has this film on your skin, and when they come in to bite, they're so small, they get coated with the material and they die because they can't breathe, basically. I think I saw a hand up. Yes.
Have you heard, I was visiting North Dakota and my cousins gave me a bounce dryer sheet to rub on my skin to repel mosquitoes. Have you heard that?
I've heard people talk about that. So the question was about bounce dryer sheets and rubbing it on your skin as an insect repellent.
Yes.
For mosquitoes, I have not seen anything in the literature that says that that's an effective thing. And it's not something I can recommend because I doubt it's a registered pesticide. It's another word of mouth thing. Yes,
I was gonna say, Diane might speak up. Sorry, guys, I'm trying not to interrupt too much, but it is something that we cannot comment on as master gardeners. It is a home recipe. We cannot tell people to use that because it's not EDA.
right. And another one, there's always been this recommendation about, I should say recommendation, about taking dishwashing detergent and making a 1% solution material and spraying houseplants and to kill things like scales and aphids. It does work, okay? You have to be really careful about how much you put. If you get too high a concentration, it will kill the plants. I know part of my PhD work was trying to use ivory liquid solutions to kill mites on apple trees. It killed the mites, but at the high rates, it also killed the trees. It defoliated them and they didn't survive. So you have to be very careful with that. But that's not a registered use, and so I can't tell you go out and do that, and you shouldn't do it either, okay? It can cause problems if the right people find out that that's being recommended. Here's another one. This is just tongue in cheek on humanicide. I'm sitting here because I just love the picture. That's a big mosquito and probably suck all the blood out of that person. And there's the bug guard that just mentioned.
Sorry, I didn't know you had it.
That's okay, not a problem. Okay, so what does it not include? Fertilizers are not pesticides. They are not regulated like pesticides are. Here in New Jersey, the landscapers do have to get a fertilizer license, but it's a totally different product. It's not, has nothing to do with any of the pesticide regulations. Liming products are also not something that are considered to be pesticides at all. And there's no license that's required for using the liming products by the landscapers. The exception are weed and feed products, okay? I'm sure you're familiar with those. You can go to the garden center and in about a month, there'll be all sorts of stuff out where you put down your fertilizer and it's got crabgrass control in it. That's a weed and feed product. Because it's got the herbicide in it, it's actually a registered pesticide. If you look at the bag, it'll have an EPA registration number. Same thing with the mixtures with the insecticides in them as well, that you put out with the mixers. Those are all registered materials and fungicides as well. So why do we use pesticides? Well, we use them for human well-being. I'm thinking of that in terms of agriculture. Okay? We use them to control pests so that we have food. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, and I'm on the point of view where we should probably use less than what we do if we can. They are a regular part of agricultural systems. Okay? And something like no-till is very important for conserving energy and soil. Everybody know what no-till is?
No-till.
No-till.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm doing it in my garden.
Okay.
So I have, I don't turn over the soil every year. I
Okay.
have raised bed, so I don't
Okay.
turn over the soil and I have an organic layer on top, which in my case happens to be
Okay.
organic leaves.
So the answer was that I don't turn over my soil every year and I do other things. On a small scale, yes, that's no-till. With a producer like a corn grower, what no-till means is when they harvest, they leave the stubble there. They don't disc it in until right before planting the next year. And what that does is it conserves the soil and it keeps it so that it doesn't become dust. Okay? Why would we worry about dust?
Dust bowl.
Yeah, thank you. The Dust Bowl was the answer. That's correct. Yes, no-till was actually developed so that we didn't have that situation again. Okay, and so, you know, it's a way to keep the soil there. And without pesticides, you can debate this, but in general, the quantity and quality of our produce and other things we eat wouldn't be as good as it is now. Of course, I tell my students in my ag entomology course, you guys are too young to remember when you bought an apple, and all you did was cut the worm out of it, the rest of it's fine, okay? But we've been indoctrinated that everything has to be perfect, okay? And with some things like apples, that's USDA's doing, they have standards. And if you're number one, which means it's perfect, you get the best price. And you get the little bag, so you buy the little bag of little apples, that's utility class, and it's much cheaper. They can't get a lot of it, so they're just trying to get rid of it. You can still make applesauce out of it, they're fine. Benefits, effectiveness of control. With most of the products, except for the fungicides, it gives us the ability to go in and stop an infestation in its tracks. Again, with fungicides, it's more of a protected situation. In most cases, they are rapidly acting. Okay. We can dampen populations before economic damage occurs. So in agriculture, we don't have this with most of the things like landscape pests. With a lot of the pests, we know at what level of density the insects have to be to actually causing what we call economic damage. It's the amount of damage, the cost of what we're losing versus the cost of what we have to do to prevent it from happening, and there's a break-even point. And if it's above the break-even point, that's when we use an insecticide and don't do anything before that. So we can do that. In the short run, insecticides, herbicides, and whatnot are cheaper. Okay. IPM programs, which is what I grow a lot, and one of the other things I do is I kind of oversee our IPM programs for the growers here in the state. Long term, it's cheaper than just using insecticides. And of course, most of them are very easy to apply. Disadvantages, ecological backlash. Everybody knows about resistance, okay? With any of these products, and there are examples with plant diseases, with weeds, and with insects, you use something long enough, they are going to become resistant to it, okay? And that also can occur with things like cultural controls. So one of the big ones in corn out in the Midwest used to be for a beetle that larvae feed on the roots of the corn plants. And they have rotation where we plant corn one year and we plant soybeans the next year because the beetle larvae can't feed on it. Well, what we didn't know was there was a part of the population that actually had a 2-year life cycle. Just like we did with insecticides, we selected for those, and all of a sudden the rotation wasn't working. They don't do it anymore. Now they used genetically modified corn with BT to solve that. Pest resurgence, that just basically means I'm going in there and I'm going to spray an insecticide. I'm going to control the population or knock it down, and then all of a sudden it's bigger than it ever was before. And what we're doing is we're going in and we're killing natural enemies that are in there. Okay. And that's why they can come back in larger numbers. We can have pest replacements, the same idea. We saw this with insects and potatoes when the first neonicotinoid insecticide came out. We used it to kill Colorado potato beetle. And then all of a sudden we had all these other insects that were problems. And it was because the older products killed all these insects. The neonicotinoids were much narrower in their spectrum of what they killed. And so they weren't being impacted, and now they became the problem insects. It wasn't Colorado potato beetle. And then we also worry about risks to users. This has gotten a lot better. There used to be a lot of materials available to the general public, the landscapers and the farmers that were very, very toxic in terms of human toxicity. EPA has done a really good job in the last 20 years of taking most of those materials away. And so there's still a risk. I talk with farmers and landscapers and pest control operators and so forth. You know, most of your products are caution materials. Those are the least toxic materials. But don't think that it can't harm you. It's just how much you get exposed to. Okay. And the classic, well, you know, you drink a danger material and you're going to die. Okay. And it used to be one of the big suicide techniques. But the same thing can happen with caution, it's just how much you get. So they're all toxic. The only thing that is close to in its labeling being non-toxic, we have no labels that say non-toxic is BT. And it says that it's relatively non-toxic. It's probably because of the inner ingredients that it's mixed with, so we can apply it. Yes,
What is BT?
oh, I'm sorry, Bacillus thuringiensis.
That explains everything.
Yeah. That's why we call it BT. Yeah. If you Google B period, T period, it should come up. But it's a naturally soil-borne bacteria. It's a bacillus, okay? And there are strains of it that are toxic to insects. And there actually, if you go a little farther, there are strains that are only toxic to certain insects. And so, and I think Ocean County has a mosquito control commission. Okay, when they do larviciding, they're probably using the variety, the subspecies name is Israeliensis, and it's only toxic to certain types of diptera. So it's toxic to mosquitoes, it's toxic to black flies. You can go to the garden centers and probably buy it to bring home. If you have fungus gnats in your house plants, it'll kill fungus gnats as well. There's also a nematode that will do exactly the same thing. But there is a strain, there's one that controls Lepidoptera. So the big use in here in the state, when we have an outbreak of spongy, that's the product the state uses when they spray. Or in fact, they're only allowed to spray that. There are synthetic things that work just as well, but you know, the BT is more environmentally friendly. There is one that is good against beetles as well, in addition to the one we already talked about. That it was brought on the market as an alternative to controlling Colorado potato beetle. So, you know, resistance is basically man-made natural selection. Okay, and a lot of things go into it. Varies between insects, but usually we see it with insects that have small generation times. In other words, they go through a generation from egg to adult very quickly. Think about aphids as an example of that. And they have the ability to have multiple generations per year. And so there's a possibility that each generation could come in contact with that insecticide because they're a pest problem. And so as we do that, we're selecting the ones that are resistant. And eventually they become the dominant individuals in the population. Okay, here's one of my favorite insects. This is what I call the poster child for resistance, Colorado potato beetle. Just look at all the things that it developed resistance to, starting with arsenicals back in the 1940s. The chloronicotinolids were developed because it actually become resistant to all the pyrethroids, and we couldn't kill it anymore. So, and when there are others, the first ones that we know of were houseflies. Very quickly, they developed resistance to DDT because it was used against the houseflies. Worldwide, we have lots of species that are resistant, and you know, starting back in the 1940s, when things like DDT and others started to come on the market. And I know this is dated, I just stopped tracking it. I didn't track it after 1990, but I can guarantee you it's higher than that now. We have, as I said earlier, we have resistance to fungicides. We have resistance to herbicides as well. We do have weeds that are resistant to Roundup. You can't kill them anymore with Roundup. And one of them is pigweed. You probably wouldn't come in contact with that, but it won't kill it anymore. And some of that has to do with them developing plants that are resistant to Roundup, so soybeans and corn, so the growers can go in at the right stage of plant development and kill all the weeds without killing the soybeans or the corn. But if you do that enough, just like the insecticides, they become resistant to it. Atrazine is a herbicide as well that's used in corn that has been around since the 1950s. And we have weeds that are resistant to it as well. We have cross resistance. So think of an insect becoming resistant to DDT, okay, because of the way it works, the flies. Well, pyrethroids work the same way. So if it's resistant to DDT, which is a chlorinated hydrocarbon, it could potentially become resistant or be already resistant to pyrethroids because they look the same way. Okay? It's what we call cross resistance. And so houseflies exhibit this, and Colorado potato beetle does as well. I mentioned those, microbial degradation. Most people don't realize that microbes in the soil do a lot of degrading of insecticides to get into the soil. And every once in a while, we have a problem with that. 30 years ago, dating myself, we had problems with the materials that we were putting down to kill Japanese beetle bugs in turf. It wasn't working anymore. And everybody thought it was because they became resistant to the material. And what they figured out was that we had selected for all these microbes in the soil to be very good at degrading it. And it was degrading the materials faster than they could work. And so we stopped using them, and a few years later, that they all went away and we didn't use them. So we can have it with microbials. Community balance upset. I'm just gonna say, think about DDT and what it did. And I will say that it was actually more than just the birds. Okay, it also impacted things like trout, where they would spray DDT for things like sponging off, okay? And it would fall to the ground and somebody would eat it, or it would degrade, and then we get rainstorms and it runs off, it gets into water systems, have an impact on the invertebrates that the trout feed on in the water systems, things like mayflies, stoneflies, and caddisflies, which if you're not a fisherman, you may not know what those are. And so the trout would eat it, and then they would have problems. Okay? So you've been asking a lot of questions. I actually put this in case there were. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
One, when you got fungus infections, I had one plant that had it last summer, dug that part out, it looks good, but my, that's not a big plant out, and then I don't keep the soil. Dig out the soil.
Okay, so dig out the plant and then,
And I feel like I could dig out the soil around them.
okay, I may defer to you on that one because I'm not real good with fungicides. But yes, okay, so the question was, I've got a plant that was attacked by a fungus, it's dying. The recommendation was to take it out, and should I get rid of the soil as well? It's gonna probably depend on what it was. But yeah, standard thing, once the plant, and I just heard them, our county agent over in Monmouth County talking about it yesterday at the meeting. Yes, if the plant gets diseased, the thing you want to do is remove it. And you want to destroy it, which means put it in a plastic bag and throw it out, in, whatever trash you can do. And he made a specific point about saying, do not compost it, because that'll just get into the soil and then you're going to use it in your garden and you have the potential of causing a problem again. Okay,
But what about the soil?
so that one I can't answer.
I don't know what plant, if it's a tomato, I would say definitely.
And stem and everything.
And some-
Yeah, so, and what was the fungus? Sorry.
Actually, it was pretty. So I think it was a fungus. It's like a rust. Does you have a plant out there?
Yeah, because a lot of fungus will just get on the foliage, not into the roots, and that it won't, it depends on what the fungus is.
Yeah,
Like
it
you
depends
said.
on what it is. I can tell you, I showed you a picture of verticillium wilt in the eggplant.
Right.
That's a soil-borne disease. And what the growers do is they rotate on a 3-year schedule. And whether they've got it or not in their field. So if I plant the eggplant here, I put a non-solanaceous crop there for the next 3 years, and then I can come back with tomatoes and peppers or eggplant in there. So there are some where You know, don't replant the same thing there. We do that with peach trees theoretically. Where when you pull peach trees out, you don't put new peach trees in because it would be soil pathogens. Yeah,
The big thing, for homeowners, I do not believe there is a soil fungicide treatment for
Probably.
most soil-borne issues.
right.
It would be and single plant, get rid of it, put something else that's not in that same family. No, just
Well, the other thing to
plant something different.
consider is, pick up the leaf, get rid of the leaves as well, because whatever it is, it may actually release spores or whatever into the soil. So you get those leaves out of there as well. Again, don't compost them. Yes.
I have a question about the grass growth inhibitor. It sounded like that you didn't think it worked so well.
Well, I think it works really well. And the landscapers tell me that it does work well. That's why they put it on golf courses. What landscapers, they chuckle because they're not gonna use it because they want it.
But it's not available for homeowners to buy?
Honestly, it's probably a general use materials, which would mean if you can find it, you can buy it. The general use materials are materials that are available to anybody, okay? It's the restricted use materials that you can't use unless you have a pesticide license, so you can't purchase them.
Would it be better to just develop GMO grass that doesn't grow so fast or something?
You know, there's probably somebody thinking about that. The only thing with genetically modified grass that I'm aware of is there was talk at one point about developing turf grass that was resistant to Roundup. And I don't think it ever made it to market because there were concerns that, you know, grasses are weeds in some circumstances and we wouldn't be able to control it if we did that. So, okay, so one more hand. Yes.
Whether it's mentioned, when you're putting out like that plant, as a fungus, and also want to clean your tools and stuff, and you know, rather fungus.
Absolutely.
Clean and do that.
Please, I know a lot about insecticides. I don't know a lot about fungicides. Yes.
Resistance, how do you insect becoming so resistant? And another question is, are they accelerating faster
Okay,
in the past?
okay. That's a whole lecture. No, so the question was, are there things that cause resistance basically to develop faster? So it has to do a lot with how many times they are sprayed. And so, I had it with me, I showed it to you, it's great, it's a little video of all these flying mosquitoes, and they come in and they spray mosquitoes. And all the black colored mosquitoes die, and there's all these little red ones still around, very, very low numbers. And so they have, you know, susceptible ones come back into that population, and so there's not resistance. But if you keep doing that, you eventually build up the population of the susceptible ones to a level that's high enough that they're the dominant. Okay, and that will continue until they stop to have the exposure to whatever insecticide it is that you're using. These things do disappear because eventually susceptibles are going to come back in. They are not being sprayed, and they will again become the dominant population. It can be cyclic, yeah, it can be like that. Sometimes, so we used to have a material that we sprayed European red mite, which is a pest of peaches and apples. And it worked really, really well. And it was called flake curing. And the mites eventually became resistant to it, and it took 15 to 20 years before they lost it. And we can use it again. So sometimes, again, a lot of it depends on how many generations per year and how long it takes to go through a generation. Mice and aphids are prime candidates because they have very short generation times. And the warmer it gets, the faster they develop. So they can go through many, many generations. And so that's that also plays into this. Okay. So I'm gonna give you a little history lesson, which I think is kind of interesting, okay? And so pesticides are not new. They've been around for a very long period of time, and there are writings going back as far as 3000 BC that the Egyptians and Chinese used things like herbs and oils as insecticides, things that we use today again, okay? And one of the themes in here, there are things that we forgot about because of the synthetic materials, but they've always been around. There's also writings 2500 BC with the Sumerians. They'd come into a conquered land, they'd take over their agriculture, and they would put sulfur on the crops. And so that kills diseases, and it also kills things like mites. So trying to get rid of their pest problems. That's another product that is available today. Peach growers use sulfur to spray their trees to kill European red mites, and they can do that right up until the day they harvest that material. Now, they're not putting it out there to kill the mites because it impacts the peach crop, because they don't. But the pickers don't like to go in because when you squish them, their equivalent of their blood is red like ours. And it stains all their clothes, and the pickers will walk out and say, we're not gonna pick. Because, you know, I can't afford to go buy new clothes. So they do spray for it, and most years it's actually the most used pesticide in New Jersey. So 1100 AD, Chinese are using insecticidal soaps, something we use again today. They're using arsenic materials. We don't have any arsenic materials today, okay? They're too tough, they're too dangerous, and they were using tobacco extracts, which is something that when the organic gardening started here in the US, the magazines were saying, take your cigarettes, soak them, and use it as an insecticide spray. It will kill insects, but I don't recommend it because tobacco is pretty toxic. The things that come out of there. And plant resistance, 1700s is the first use of it. This is a fly that lays its eggs in weed stems. The larvae eat the interior of the stem out. Of course, you don't get any head. You don't get any crop out of it. So plant resistance isn't new either. We do have what I call the pre-pesticide era. That's before basically World War II, where 1700s we're using botanical insecticides, and when we have rediscovered a lot of things, although things like neem were new, we didn't have that back in the 1700s. 1800s, people started to move around, redistribute. That caused a lot of our pest problems. Yes.
What are some of the ones that we rediscovered? If neem is new, like what are some of them that they were using in the 1700s?
Pyrethrin. They would have used oil-based products. Today, the dormant oils and the summer oils are petroleum-based. Back then, they would have been whale oil-based. Okay. Rotenone would have been another one that they had back then that was rediscovered, I'd say probably in the 1960s, for use as an insecticide. So as people move around, one of the things that happens, they came over here from Europe, they knew what they liked to eat in Europe, and they brought those crops with them. And when they did that, they brought the pests with them. So a lot of the pests we have in agriculture weren't here. We brought them with them. And that's still occurring. You're all familiar with spotted lanternfly, I'm sure. An Asian longhorn beetle and emerald ash borer. And I can go right down the list. There's all kinds. And there's a new one coming, boxwood moth. It's not here in New Jersey yet, but it's in New York. It'll get here eventually. So that costs things. It also put people in scent communities, okay? And so we started to have problems with urban pests as well.
In 1880, over in France, we had the first development of the first commercial sprayer. What crop do you think they were spraying in France? Grapes, right, exactly, for wine. And so they answered grapes, they got it right. And so, yeah, that drove a lot of things. But this is the way it looked when they sprayed. How many of you want to be the person that's driving the Timo horses, pushing this thing along? Okay, so what's happening is there's a gas powered engine on there that's blowing that dust out into that field. If there's a wind change, not only the horses are going to get contaminated with material. We don't do this anymore. There are no products on the market in agriculture that are dust products or things like this, except maybe there is and I can't, it's used by it can be used by the organic folks. I can't remember the name of it right now, but when we use it, it's a powder and it coats the plants, makes them white. And then when the insects feed on it, the materials in it actually rip up their gut system and they die. So it's interesting. Okay. First powered sprayer was developed in Germany in 1904. It was used on fruit and vine crops, and it was also used to control cotton boll weevil, which was a big problem here in the United States. Up until 1970. This is one of the rigs they used to use to spray apple trees. Okay, and I've got another one. Here's another one. That's how we used to spray apple trees.
Yeah.
Back then.
That was probably.
Now we do it with an air blast sprayer. And that's what it looks like. Okay, and this thing is designed to do exactly what I tell applicators you don't want to do, and that's cause drift. Okay, but that's what these are designed to do. They blow material out and they can blow the rows at a time. And the earlier in the season, the more they can do. They actually have their program set up where they go down, once it gets to a certain leaf out stage, they go down one row, they skip a row and come back. And then the next time they move on to the blue spring. It's less material going out and they save money by doing that and they get very effective control. So in 1920s, first use of airplanes to apply chemicals. And it was used to control boll weevil. And there's your crop duster. Anybody want to take a guess why 1920s we started to use airplanes?
We didn't have the manpower.
We didn't have the manpower. No, we had plenty of manpower. I'm sorry.
Airplanes were just invented, or,
Airplanes were just invented. Well, we were a little past just being invented.
I mean,
More common,
I'm sorry?
more common and cheaper.
No more, no. What did we use in, who's a Peanuts fan? What did the Red Baron fly? A plane. World War I was the first use of planes as a weapon of war. We had all these pilots that came back to the United States. They wanted to be pilots, but there weren't any jobs. They either did barnstorming or someone came up with the idea, we can outfit a plane so that we can apply pesticides to large acres of crops and get paid to do it. Okay, so that's why, and we still do this today, not like we used to here in the state. The biggest use of planes here in the state is for mosquito control and for sponging on when we have problems. 20s and 30s, insecticides weren't very efficient, hard to use, they were hazardous. These come some of the materials that we were using, okay? Coal and oil distillates, plant products, inorganic type materials, like the material I can't think of right now. And it was very common. Anybody could go in the store and buy lead arsenate. This actually was used as an insecticide in tree food up until the 1970s. But it's been around for a very long period of time. This is Paul Mueller. And he is credited for figuring out that DDT killed insects. Okay, and so DDT, he isn't the person that developed the molecule. Somebody else did during World War I, when they were looking for materials they could use for chemical warfare. It didn't kill humans very well, but he figured out it killed insects. And so he was responsible for DDT. And we also had organophosphates. And this was discovered by a German scientist. And these are materials that are toxic to humans. But again, they weren't as good as mustard gas. And they figured out that, you know, we could use it to kill insects. So what were the impacts? Well, we use it in World War II to control fleas, lice, and mosquitoes. All of the GIs that went to Europe and to Asia were given a little bag when told to sprinkle their bodies with this little bag. It was a bag of DDT to stop those things from occurring. Mueller won a Nobel Prize. I don't think anybody today would think that the discoverer of DDT should get a Nobel Prize. The impact on it in public health, pest control, with controlling things like malaria and lice and fleas and so forth was so great that they gave a Nobel Prize. It's kind of like the people, the two researchers that just got from the University of Pennsylvania got a Nobel Prize for the
RNA. mRNA.
Right, vaccine, that's the word I was looking for, vaccine. Yeah, they were just given that, they deserved it. And so after the war, we started to use it for other things, okay? And because of that, that's where on these synthetic pesticides started. And it led to speculation by entomologists that we were going to kill all the insect pests in the world. So we never had a problem because of DDT. Anybody agree that happened? Get my hand away. Okay. Yes.
Is DDT still used, in other countries?
Yes.
Still used?
Yes. There are other countries. It's usually in the poorer countries because DDT is very, very cheap in comparison to the other materials. But I will say, you know, in agricultural crops in other parts of the world, they can't use it and legally ship it into the United States because it's not allowed to be used here. But it is still used. It's still used in areas for mosquito control, although it's not the best thing to be using because there are resistance problems. Yes.
There's still components though of DET that's used, the 2,4-D, right? Isn't that one of the,
No, I don't think
oh, I
so.
thought 2,4-D came from the DDT, part of DDT, but it's.
I don't think so.
Okay.
There was a product called Kelthane,
Oh, yeah.
which was an acaricide, and they actually took it off the market because in the processing, there were still residues of DDT in it that they couldn't get rid of. And EPA made them take it off the market. I should say I'm unsure about that. I would think it was more related to 2,4,5-T, which was another herbicide. Both were components of Agent Orange.
But maybe that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking, not.
Yeah, and so that may be where it came from. And so this was commonplace with the DDT. And this, you know, this is a child being dusted with DDT. And again, we would never do this today.
You have a question in the back of the.
Sorry.
Yeah, one question for you. Back in the early mid-60s, in Ocean County area, trucks would come by, mosquito trucks with.
Yes.
What material was that? It had a gasoline type smell and everybody fog everybody.
Okay, so that was a thermal fog. In fact, the gasoline smell is because of what they do is they take the insecticide and heat it up. And it becomes a gas or the fog. And so that may have been actually kerosene material. And so we have those products. Now, today I have a thermal fog that when I used to work with, bacterial leaf spores, oats, we used it to fog trees. It's like they use the trees in arachnophobia and collect all the insects that came out and collected all the leafhoppers and tested them to see if they had the virus in their bodies. We were trying to figure out which leafhoppers. So what happens there, we use pyrethrum. You put that in there, you put kerosene in there, you turn it on, and there's a little heat generator that heats up the pyrethrum and turns it into a gas, and that's probably what they were doing back then.
That's the one I wrote my life behind.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I did exactly the same. Kid in California, they do that right there. They do that right there. Yeah, those bikes. We would never do that today. So DDT was not toxic to humans. Okay, and in fact, they still say that probably everybody still has some level of DDT residues in your body. That's because it's fat soluble. Okay, our body gets rid of it, but they get rid of it much slower than we accumulate it. But that was never really considered a health problem. That's not the reason DDT was taken off the market. It was the ecological problems. But we know now that DDT is in a group of compounds, and I think it's the only pesticide that are called endocrine disruptors, and that makes them promoters of things like breast cancer. And so if that was something they found in the new product today, they were trying to register, it would never go anywhere further. But yeah, we did that. I have pictures. I don't think I have any today, but I have pictures of kids doing that. And so we had overuse. We started to have residue show up in milk. That was DDT showing up in dairy well milk. And we saw the impacts on the food chains. And then this woman came out with a book, Silent Spring. How many of you read Silent Spring? Okay. She made a lot of predictions. Every one of them came true. She was right. She was a USDA scientist, a biologist, and she did a lot of field work, and she started making observations and to develop this book. Unfortunately, when she came out, she was severely ridiculed by the scientific community, especially the entomologists. And several years later, we had growth. They were wrong. She was right.
When did that come out?
In the 1962. And I think you can still get it in paperback.
You can still get it.
Yeah.
There's a statue of her, it's all.
What's whole? That doesn't surprise me. Yeah, and there's also another book out there. It's by the Rachel Carson Society called Beyond Silent Spring. Kind of an update. It's kind of probably dated by now, but it was an update of how far we've come or didn't come based on what she predicted. So because of all this, we had current pest management practices, IPM, okay? I'm starting to run out of time, so I'm going to start shortening some of this. But IPM basically promotes a more holistic approach to pest control. It was first talked about in 1961 by a group of entomologists with the University of California. They started this, and it was because of the resistance problems we were having in agriculture. The roots of all of it are in biological control, which is the use in terms of insects, use of predatory and parasitic insects to control pests. Okay. And we came up with that. President Carter got involved with this in 1977. Came out with a presidential decree, which today everybody knows what that is. But back, 10 years ago, my students in my class had no idea what that was. Mandating the use of pest management. And so when he made that, when they make decrees, certain parts of government get very involved. So USDA, they got all concerned because they couldn't get everybody to use it, they could lose funding. EPA, as I said, 1977, EPA was already in existence and had regulation responsibilities for these materials, and the FDA as well. I'll just tell you, they didn't get to that. They didn't get everybody to use it. Here's where we are now, IPM, and again, we have programs for growers. We have for tree fruit, we have them for vegetables. We do have programs for nurseries and greenhouses, and we have, that's it. Yes.
I just had a question, about, kale and clay.
Yeah, that's the one I couldn't think of. Oh, thank you. Yes, it's a registered pesticide.
Oh,
What was the product?
Kale and clay. So the product I was talking about that turns the plants white and the insects eat it and it disrupts their gut system, it's kale and clay. Yeah, I shouldn't forget that. We did a lot of work trying to kill brown mammal and clay, but it didn't work because they don't feed right in the right way. But yeah. And so we are still trying to implement IPM on all acreage here in the United States and other places. In '97, President Clinton had his own decree about, he wanted to see by a certain date that 75% of all the agriculture was using IPM. And again, USDA, EPA, and FDA got all excited about this. And when they hit their date, they said, oh yeah, we met it. We made our 75%. And the scientific community said, really? I don't think so. And it's because of what we call the IPM continuum. This has to do with adoption of what practices they're using. Yeah,
I'm sorry, can we take a 10-minute break?
absolutely.
I know, you just kind of finished the history and I'm like, everybody's starting to get a little antsy.
Okay.
Can we get to take a few? Yeah.
Yep. No, I'll be happy to give you a 10-minute break.
We do
My
have-
voice a rest.
We actually do have until 12:30, so don't feel like you have to be out by 12.
Okay.
You're good.
Well,
Is anybody
as long
talking?
as I'm back on campus by 2, I'm
Oh,
fine.
what, yeah. Well, assuming you're traffic and Hopewell.
Well, I'm gonna find a different way.
Yeah,
I used to have a way to get here where I came down 33,
yeah.
took back roads to get to there, but my newbie took me down Route 9.
Oh. And the lake with no left. Yeah, no. No, you take, I'll go up to camp. Yeah, do it
I'm
either way,
just
but
gonna go down Whitesville Road for a distance and it'll eventually kick me into getting me over.
5 minutes, or you can go right up on the parkway and go up, but I don't know if 18's any better once you get up.
18, that's fine.
So I mean, it's up to you.
And again, 9 was great until I got to Hope.
Yeah, and I've never done it from Hopewell,
Okay.
but yeah, I'll go up, I'll either take the back way or I'll go up the parkway. And it's like not that far off.
So you just down Whitesville? or-
You go down to Whiteville and then it heads road 571.
Okay.
And then you better make a right and see the Home Depot and all right now.
Okay, yeah, okay. I will try.
Stay and you turn on 9 and then on Parkway entrance.
Okay, all right.
Maybe that's easier than taking 70, like she was saying, don't go back 70.
Right, no, I don't like that road either. I actually have my gas.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
But it didn't.
Every time I come from campus, it takes me a different way every.
Okay.
Oh, and George, let's turn off your mic, just so that in case you decide to. Just, not even that. Decide to go to the restroom. You know what?
I'm fine.
But help yourself if you have any goodies or any, not the stuff, how you doing? All right. Yeah, I try to keep the personal questions down, but you get that.
I kind of invited him, so.
I have great questions. Things. Fire retardant, they spray.
No.
The only reason I ask. And everything.
Right.
I don't know. Fire retardant. Fine. Couches, stuff like that. Have house deals. Not needles.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't know if that, I just,
Yeah,
I heard you
no.
talking about it, so I didn't know if it was.
No,
the
no.
same thing. I was just gonna ask everybody. Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, okay, all right, I wasn't sure, I didn't know.
No problem.
Thank you.
At our house farm, we're. I took their house after the rain. We have a closet. So I ended up, because it slowed my part down, so that's their part. That's how that. And so, right, so I ended up being most susceptible and had to be put on heart monitors for just, and that was just from my house, one house. It was crazy. They told me I was just a bug.
Yeah, yeah.
Different, right, yeah.
But, yeah,
Yeah, so I now continue to class, I go with the houses. Yeah, it's, so I can actually tell when I go to a house that's had a lot of confidence. I'll end up starting to get, problems with my breathing, so whatever it is, it's still being used 7 years ago. Could be, it's just amazing.
Not that I don't know about that industry, but I've never heard.
I don't know what,
How?
yeah, that's what we use. I wouldn't have known the difference, but then someone in the industry as well.
No, very interesting.
Just, yeah.
I was just reading from it on the. So I worked at San Diego, and I teach marine classes out there, and an example, we have osprey.
Yes.
The osprey is an example of food chain, because right, those insects, right, works great, because the fish knows, and it's accumulating like in the fat layers. And so then the osprey, fish are gonna eat a whole lot of bugs, and osprey eat a whole lot of fish, so they're getting more. And then what happens is they sat on their eggs and they crack. These are eggshells right in that they produce. So it's funny, you think like it's gonna kill you like these bugs, but it doesn't, it has these other effects. And that's it, yeah, and are we selling that now, like? We're still trying to make a profit on people who don't have any other alternatives.
Yeah, why don't we?
'70s, it was my job at American Cyanide. All agencies for people that were illiterate. For use of, and couldn't use this product on your face, so I would have to draw. Like a salt shaker, and then so all of our packaging is in house. Everything was not being used back at the time when people were painting fluorescents on watches, so they did all kinds of chemicals, so it was cyanide, just fertilizer. Well, at that time, it was in Wayne, so their headquarters was in Wayne, New Jersey. So I was working at the, so it had to be for everybody stopped using in the US, so now they were turning their focus on. To use the chemicals that we were no longer allowed to use. Right. Yes, the enemy, I don't even know. I know they closed down, yeah. Yeah.
The neighbor, when I did the survey, there's a discharge stream and I wanted to see what survey, like we do caterpillars and stuff. Nothing. I found one blood work, nothing. And that's you can do pretty big, but then it empties into what's there for rare. We're like, ooh, this is not good.
Right?
Wow. Yep.
No problem. So, you have a question?
Right, I would think.
Yes.
No.
Oh, no, well, that's a. Yeah. She's like, yeah.
Right,
But yeah, I just didn't. Yes, fertilizer. They do- And I found it, okay.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Retired. Retired.
Hey, college?
Oh, we actually,
Yeah. It's like,
our IPM. University of Pennsylvania.
Okay. Okay.
Advice for, get rid of it. You know, cover your- coming in, and the mice are coming to get rid of
yeah, it's just.
Yes, yes. So.
You need a fertilizer license, sure, you need a fertilizer license.
Okay.
I don't actually. Like, training.
Okay. Very interesting. Which one? License. I started Penn in '96. I'm in the Penn as a postdoc. I moved into his first lab.
Okay.
And, 25 years to develop.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, sorry, I didn't really.
All right, thank you.
We're just gonna get you anything you're looking for.
Found a really good chocolate chip cookie. I'm fine.
Okay, next week, if they're still there, we'll give you a bag. Right home.
My wife.
But you said you have to be up at Rutgers second.
Yeah, I've got a class with.
Kelly found out the answer, but we had somebody call yesterday that wanted to do New Jersey fertilizer. She's trying to get a renewal.
Right. That's all done.
Yeah, the way. And I didn't know Profax was for fertilizer and I would have thought. So I think that maybe just something, a little plug in for commercial,
Okay,
you know, about core, what's, that's, you know, what to
Okay.
do. Nothing
Alright.
crazy.
I can do that.
I think, yes, I saw it, they're doing the initial certifications now, we have to see if it's.
They passed the fertilizer law. License. Said you're not gonna do it. No, because they use pesticides.
That's enough.
They wanted me to do it, and I said, I'm not doing that. I don't have that kind of education. So, Jim Murphy,
Oh, yeah. Soils, yes, yes.
plant science is the one.
Okay.
And it's really, I mean, it's online.
I just don't think about it. Yeah, but I heard about the Profax, but I'm thinking it's testing. For me, I think testing is pesticide. I don't realize that it's separate.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. not-
When you're ready to go back home, I'll just make sure.
Okay, I'm ready to go anytime.
Okay.
Get back.
This is how we do. I didn't even look at the time, so. If we can settle back down, but yes, we still use the bells. That's the only thing that cuts through everything. Although my voice can do it too. So if everybody can settle back down so we can get started or restarted.
Okay,
Okay, yes, you need any more water, you're good.
no, I'm fine.
All right, and Peggy, yeah, nothing's going on questions still online so far. We're still good.
Okay, good.
I think you have about 10 people on here.
All right, great. So we were talking about whether USDA, EPA, and FDA actually vet the requirements that President Clinton gave them for 75% adoption. And I say no, and they said yes. It's because of this curve. We call it the IPM adoption curve. And so what they were looking at is what's the least level of IPM that somebody could do and meet that criterion. So they were looking at everybody down at this part of the curve. And of course, everybody in the United States, if they were doing any kind of IPM practice at all, fits into that category. And so they could say yes. But what they were probably doing is just monitoring for their pests, which is great because that's the basic level that we want them all to do, because we don't want you going out there and just because it's May 1st, I'm going to put down my insecticide or my herbicide to control them. We don't want you to spray unless they're actually there and they're an economic problem. Medium, they're doing more of the things like using maybe natural insecticides. They're doing mating disruption. They may be doing some cultural practices. It's something that lives in the soil, those kinds of things. And then the high adoption would be, they're also incorporating things like using natural enemies and using things like parasitoids, which are basically parasites of insects. Okay, we give them a special name. And so if they look at those levels, we were nowhere close. But we're a little better today. Probably the best crop that we have in terms of this adoption is tree fruit. Although brown marmorated stink bug did make a dent in that. A colleague at Penn State that had a slide that was basically a toilet that was flushing. And it was animated, and this thing was 40 years of IPM down the tubes because of brown marmorated stink bug. That changed the game in tree fruit. We had to go back to the practices initially because we didn't know what to do about it. Where all we could do was spray. We now know what we can do. We can also divide things into what I call patterns of crop production. Subsistence, that's free the synthetic materials, small farms, small acreage, producing things for local consumption. And we move from there into exploitation. This is what happened when we had the synthetic materials. We had very good tools to kill pests. It allowed growers to be able to manage larger and larger acreages because of the ease at which they could control the pests and the money they could make because they were able to do that. But they were doing things like using fixed spray schemes. So my comment about May 1st, that would be a fixed spray scheme, okay? And so that's not what we want because it leads to problems. And then putting down treatments, whether or not they had the pest in the field or not. I had a problem with it last year. I'm going to spray because I might have a problem with it this year. go into crisis. Here's where we start to have problems. This is where we were, at least in cotton and several other crops, starting in the 50s, where we start to see resistance develop. Things are no longer working. We have to substitute materials that get good control. We start to have those resurgence things happening in secondary pest outbreaks I talked about. And things are getting more costly. And they're not getting the return on what they're investing into that. When you go to disaster, which is basically everything stops working. And the best example of this is cotton bollworm, where it got so bad in the 60s that they had to stop growing cotton in places like Texas and California and Mexico, which was big cotton producers at the time because nothing was working. We go into the integrated pest management phase, and I will be honest with you, integrated pest management was developed because of the problems in California, cotton, okay? The folks at UC Davis are the ones that came up with a lot of this, and basically saying, you know, we need to look at ecology, we need to look at all the different things we can do to control these pests and put them all together in some kind of integrated program. And so that's IPM. And, you know, we want them to do things like if there are cultural and mechanical things they can do, we want them to do it. We want them to use plant resistance and biocontrol. And then if those don't work, use the insecticides. So there is this opinion that IPM means that you don't use pesticides. That's not what it is. It does use pesticides, just you use it in a much wiser way than we used to. Okay, and typically, in a perfect world, it's a last resort. This is bull weevil, a very quick example. This is a female. She feeds on the developing fruit here, and she also lays her eggs inside that fruit. And when she lays the eggs and feeds on it, that makes that bull not marketable. It's never going to get to the point where we can get cotton lint out of it. And so it's a serious pest. Even today, they still have to do things to control it. It's native to Mexico, got introduced in the 1800s. And I just mentioned that. And so, and the larvae feed inside. So that's what a damaged boll looks like. You can see why it's a problem. You're not getting any cotton lint out of that. That's a complete loss. And so in high populations, it was potential for everyone in the field to look like this. And so pre-World War II, they grew cotton at subsistence levels. It was confined in the US to the southeastern United States. And their main control was picking up the infested bolls off the plants to try and stop this. That's a healthy one. And so these are all insecticides, dieldrin, aldrin, and benzene hexachloride, very effective against the boll weevil. That allowed us to grow cotton in Texas and California and bring it back to Mexico where it couldn't be grown because of the weevil. But again, 1950s, we started to have problems. They started adding things in. Methylparathion is one of the most toxic insecticides ever developed. Had an LD50 of 8 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. That's about a half a teaspoon of material. If you ingest it, you're done. Okay, you won't get to the emergency room in time. And that also killed off all the natural enemies. And they also started to use DDT to get the secondary pests. Resistance, we started to get resistance in the secondary. And so things like the cotton bollworm and the cotton budworm in the 60s became actually a bigger problem. And they were the ones that were actually responsible for stopping growing cotton in places like Texas and California. They used other things. We started to get cross resistance, 18 sprays a year, and nothing was working.
Wow.
That's kind of where we were in the 80s with Colorado potato beetle here in New Jersey. They would spray up to 18 times a year to try to keep killing the beetle. And by 1970, no cotton in those areas. They use IPM today. okay? And there's a lot of reliance on things like harvesting, growing varieties that they can harvest earlier, that, you know, the weevil isn't there. Using natural enemies and other types of things. They do have BT transgenic plants today. They already have resistance problems in the BT cotton, just like we do in BT corn and everything else. And again, I tell my students, we always put things in one basket. And when we do, that's when we get the problems. And so we're seeing it. This is in Enterprise, Alabama. And that's Lady Liberty, I think, and she's holding up a statue of the cotton boll weevil. And in Enterprise, they have a festival to celebrate the cotton boll weevil every year. In fact, I just saw it a couple of weeks ago. Get up at 5:30 on Sunday to see it. It's called Big Town Little something or other. It's these couple that go around to all these kinds of weird things and whatnot. And they might want to guess why they're celebrating the boll weevil. Yes.
They were thanking it for forcing them to diversify their crops.
Into one crop. Peanuts. Their main source of income in that town is peanut production. And so they didn't grow peanuts before the boll weevil wiped out all the cotton. So they celebrate the boll weevil. Okay, I've already kind of covered a lot of this. Integrated pest management uses multiple tactics. The point is to keep them below economically damaging levels. That also means that you will be leaving some level of pest in the field, which is sometimes hard to get growers to accept. They like to see things that are used to sterile environments. Yes?
How many eggs?
I don't know for sure, but I'm gonna say that you can probably lay one, because they lay one egg per bowl. She can probably do 30 to 40 of them, you know, but I'm guessing, I don't know for sure.
What was the, I'm sorry, you don't have to repeat the answer,
Yeah.
but what was the question?
Question was, how many eggs does a cotton boll weevil female lay?
Yeah.
Okay,
And how does the organic cotton industry deal with?
good question.
with
They,
pests,
they
things that are
may,
organic?
I don't know for sure. They may be, using plants that are resistant to it, but it's been made resistant using traditional breeding tactics instead of genetically modifying them. They may be relying on doing things that, really, encourage the natural enemies. Because it does have natural enemies. And if they're spraying, they're probably things like hydrogen and those kinds of things.
Does the government do anything for like when they have these large scale issues to say, okay, all of Texas is having a problem? You know, you should plant some other crop and then move the cotton crop someplace else, like from California to Texas or whatever.
I don't know if it's, so the question is, yes, I gotta remember that. If you're having a problem with cotton and you can't grow it anymore, well, would the government say, move it someplace else and plant something else?
Right, help you to
Right,
say, okay.
and so I know of no example where they've actually told them to move the plantings like from Texas to California. But the recommendation would be probably, plant something else.
No, but would they help you, like, okay, we're set up for cotton, we have all the machinery, whatever, to deal with cotton?
Probably not,
Yes.
probably not. Although, you know, in Texas, they actually, their legislature, and this goes back to the 70s, actually passed laws that said that they had to either plant them by a certain time so that they got to maturity before the weevils, or they had to remove all of the stubble and everything. They might harbor the adults that are overwintering in the fields. So they did try to do something, but no, they probably wouldn't pay them to, put them in working with other things. I've never heard of that. So we, also, we're trying to conserve the environment as well. And, unfortunately, it's selective for every pest in production. And so, apples has probably 40 different pests, just insects. And we have to do something different for every one of them. So it becomes really hard to integrate everything into the system to get the most. Okay, you got a handout, you can look at that. Here's our objectives: reduce populations, prevent economic loss, accept some pest damage. Again, that can be really hard. When I worked with Colorado AWLNEA plant, when it first came out with a variety of BT that would kill the beetle larvae while they were on the plants, it was really hard to get the growers to adopt it, because when the beetle fed on the plant, it picked up the bacteria, and then it takes a period of time to work. It makes them sick and they stop eating, and then they eventually die. And growers were used to seeing when you spray something, it falls off the plant because it's dead. So there's, it's sometimes hard to get them to accept some damage. And so we want to do this, and the ultimate goal is have a long lasting solution. And okay. I'll do a little, I've got at least another half an hour, so if you're okay with that, I can do that, yeah.
Could you comment on, I think it's Pyrogen, it's from Los Angeles, they say.
Yes.
Mosquito sprayers that we have given, homeowners are now with a lot of mosquito spray, they're hiring companies. to
Yeah.
come in.
Right, Mosquito Joe and
Right,
all these things.
because they always say, doesn't hurt anything, just the mosquitoes, and in effect,
That's a lie. Let's start there. Pyrethrin kills a lot more than just mosquitoes. So they're normally coming in, they're either doing a liquid application to the surfaces, or they're doing fogging. So I mentioned that I did work with a thermal fogger fogging oak trees to get leaf buffers out of the trees. That wasn't the only thing that fell out of the trees. Pyrethrin is very toxic to a lot of different insects, okay? But some will look dead and they'll come out of it. And that's one of the problems with pyrethrin. It has great, what we call knockdown, but then they get up and they walk away, or they fly away. So they're not really dead. So, there's other things that they're potentially killing in that environment that you don't want to be killed if they come in contact with it. Yeah.
I just wanted to know if that particular fogging technique is toxic to dogs or cats.
Okay, I didn't hear the first part.
If that
Which
particular fogging technique.
Okay. So the question is, the fogging that they're doing for, say, mosquitoes in the backyard could be toxic to pets. If the pets are there and they come in contact with it, yes. Okay, once it's settled into the foliage and had a chance to dry, it shouldn't be a problem. And unless your dog likes to eat plant material, that's what you treated. That could be, but I'll also say that pyrethrin also breaks down almost immediately. So it's broken down by UV light. And so the reason we can spray tomatoes with it and pick tomatoes and eat it the same day is that it breaks down almost immediately. Now, they also put PBO in it, piperidine butoxide, which is a synergist that makes it more toxic to insects. So again, there's a potential they're killing other insects as well.
is it effective against mosquitoes? Because, people in my neighborhood think it is. Is it effective against mosquitoes to do that?
It's only going to kill what comes in contact with it while it's a fog. And most mosquitoes are mobile and they do move around. Okay, so they may get it there, but there's others that could come in after that.
I'm gonna just ask everybody to hold their questions a little bit so that George can get through a little further. because we're getting a little off our pesticide specific for us
Right.
as master gardeners.
Okay,
Sorry.
so talk a little bit about safety here. And so I'm gonna talk a little bit about human risk. This is how we look at it. We look at risk being equal to how toxic is it and what's your exposure to it. Okay? And so to manage it, we either deal with the toxicity, you use things that aren't as toxic, or you deal with protecting yourself so that you don't get exposed to materials. EPA requires these testings. Acute toxicity is just toxicity that occurs from a one-time exposure. How many of you use the materials in the spring to kill the fertilizer and has the crabgrass grow or killer in the bag? And you put it down, what happens when you open the bag? Okay, well, when you open the bag, there's usually a little dust cloud that comes out, okay? And so what have you just done? You don't have some kind of rudimentary respirator on, you just inhaled material. And if you're sensitive, that can become an acute exposure type problem, okay? It's very simple, and the landscapers, then they pour it in their hopper, same thing. And then they walk through and spray it, and with them, I will walk backwards and go, is this the way you apply your materials? And of course, they say no. And so if they're walking through it, a lot of the materials, the labels say to put it down when the grass is wet. And if it is, and they don't have waterproof footgear on, that's another acute exposure. So these are things that can happen very simply. And so I just demonstrated oral dermal exposure and inhalation. They use rats and mice to do this testing. They're looking for the development of LD50s. Okay, but what the signal words are based on. If you look at safety data sheet with the farmers in the commercial industry, the suppliers have to give them a safety data sheet. This information is in that safety data sheet, so they can look at that. These are just the ranges, and this just to point out that for all three types of exposure, the smaller the amount, the more toxic the material is. They also do chronic studies. And so that's what happens, multiple exposures to small amounts of material over long periods of time. Cancer is the big one, although they are concerned about birth defects, reproductive problems, and with the insecticides, especially the older ones, because they attack systems that were in our bodies as well, are there any neurological issues? And so they do it with feeding studies. And my first job out of college was to do feeding studies and also put rats in gas chambers to do acute toxicity, where every day, each group, they had a specialized diet, each group had a special level of the material, and they got fed every day for 2 years. And then at the end, they euthanized them, and they look for tumors and cancer and those kinds of things. Before they do, they try mating, try to mate males and females, and that's to look at the sterility and what do the offspring look like when they're out. The good news, there's no info on a pesticide label about this. When the companies do this, they do it early on in the whole process, because if one of these pops up, they're not going to get it registered. And so it never gets to market, so there's no reason to have any of this information on there, but they do look at it. So today, and especially with homeowners, very few of the products are anything but a caution material. Okay, so the homeowners and most of the industry, they're getting the least toxic materials that they're using. So the toxicity has kind of been handled for them by EPA. So we work on the exposure. And, when you mix out the material, that's the most dangerous part, okay? Once you dilute it in water and make applications, it's still a possibility, but it goes down just because the amount of exposure you have to have has to go up because you've diluted it. Okay? So concentrates when you're mixing and measuring. Of course, this is something you don't want to do, okay? Years ago, this would have been a picture of me emptying bags of material into a sprayer. We worked at rates of pounds per acre. Okay, today we work at very small amounts per acre. And so I've got a 2-gallon jug here, and what I'm demonstrating is I've got this unwieldy container, and I'm trying to measure out a teaspoon here. I talked with my students about statistics a lot, and I know that no matter how safe I am, statistically, I'm gonna spill it on my hands. And this is very simple to deal with. You put on a pair of rubber gloves. All you have to do. And if you do this, the exposure level goes down by 99%. Okay. Here's another one. Okay, I know that's an 8-ounce coffee cup. Okay. But, you know, this is to point out, and this time I've actually got a Roundup container. This is to point out that you shouldn't measure things out with anything that could be mistaken for some other kind of use, okay? We use measuring cups, and I am so particular about it that one cup has labeling on it says insecticides only, and the other one says herbicides only. Because I don't want somebody putting insecticides in the herbicide one, maybe having residues that when we spray our plants in the greenhouse, all the plants die. Okay, we only want to do that for the weeds that are around the greenhouse. So this is something else you don't want to do. Here's the 99% reduction. So then this was actually, work was done at Rutgers. We were able to get product from the manufacturer without the active ingredient, put a fluorescent dye in it and have the people go through the process. And then we put them under a black light. And if they got contaminated, you can absolutely see it's happening. So this is no gloves with long sleeves, and you can see the hands are glowing. And so put the gloves on and it goes down by 99%. You can see that here. I'm not sure if in the back you can see that, but there are some little white dots here. Fingers tips. Anybody want to take a guess why that's there? They picked up the container. No, we've got it visually down here. When they took off the gloves, they forgot to rinse them off first. Okay, so when they took the first glove off, this one's not contaminated, but then they use it to get the other one. Okay, something very simple to remember when you're doing that. This is not the way you want to. You can laugh all you want. That's why it's a little comic relief. Okay.
Like to see it.
Yeah, and so this is what I call my homeowner spray suit. And I have talked to my neighbors about, don't spray your materials like this. I've got shorts, I've got short sleeves, I've got my waterproof foot gear. It's great when I'm fly fishing in the middle of July, but you know, this is not something I should be wearing if I'm putting down granular materials. This is bare minimum. I've got gloves, long sleeves, long pants, and waterproof gear. Okay? And I talk with the industry all the time, and I still see the professionals not dressed properly. Okay. I sometimes see them in shorts. That's when I get out and say something. You should have long pants on. So there are situations where I would recommend this. So you saw that air blast sprayer that I showed. I used to work with those. They have a 500-gallon tank, and we put the water in with a drop system, and it goes into the top of the tank. And when you put the material in, you have to reach up and drop it in. Good splash. So simple. With goggles, and this is just a rubber apron. And when I'm done, I take it off. Both of them. I don't, so that's if you're doing that kind of operation. Here's a spray suit I used to use with that air blast sprayer, because I didn't have an enclosed tractor cap. They didn't make it back in the 80s. They didn't come along until the 90s. This is my New England whaler suit. That is a heavy rubber suit. I've got rubber gloves on. I've got a waterproof hat. I've got goggles, a respirator, and waterproof foot gear. Okay. And I would get on the tractor and pull that air blast sprayer through the apple orchards, making sprays of different compounds for different tests that we were doing. I was preventing that hazard, but there's another problem with the suit. How do I get it off? As fast as I possibly can. Okay. I'm sorry?
You have to hose yourself down.
No, we never actually did that. So what I'm referring to in July and August, this heavy rubber suit, heat exhaustion. Actually, they would sell, it was the best. And I would put ice packs in it to try and prevent that. It helped a little bit, wasn't perfect. Today I use what's called a Tyvek suit. It's basically the same material that they put on the houses. And they make a suit out of it. It's much lighter weight. They're still hot, but nowhere near like this. Okay, gloves, don't want to wear these. I yell at my wife about it all the time. But it's only silver soap. Don't wear cloth gloves. I know that you love them for gardening, but don't use them even with the safer soap. Because remember, it's still got a caution signal. So we want to use some kind of rubber. This is more for commercial folks. When they buy their gloves, a lot of them come with this lining and they're not cheap. And if you get product in there, there's no way to get it out of the lining. You gotta throw the glove. And so we also worry about thickness, and this is basically what should the rubber be, what kind of rubber. And so for years, I would stand in front of master gardeners and in front of farmers and landscapers and all sorts of applicators and say, you can use neoprene gloves, natural rubber gloves, butyl gloves, and nitrile gloves, and they will be good for any pesticide that you apply. I don't say that anymore. We have data now that what's called breakthrough. It's the amount of time when you put a drop of the chemical on the outside that it takes to get to the inside where your hand is. And they do this now. And eventually, everything will get from the outside to the inside. It's just a matter of how long does it take. And so today on certain products, if they know that certain gloves shouldn't be used, they tell you on the label, use only these gloves. Okay. And the most common statement is only use butyl or nitrile gloves. Okay. So if you use nitrile gloves, you should be okay for anything. If it doesn't say anything, any of those other gloves are fine. Butyl are not as hot as the natural rubber. I like them because of dexterity. I also have an unlimited supply because we have to wear them in the laboratory as well. Okay, boots. The things that are not waterproof shouldn't use, okay? And with the industry people, you know, I tell them there are work boots out there that are waterproof and they will work with these materials. That's what I tell people, but you know, most of the people I've gotten after in my neighborhood are wearing some kind of pullover rubber boot. These are similar to what we used to buy for totes, pullover in rain. They're made out of nitrile, and you can wear sneakers and you can wear leather work boots. Just put them on when you're using material and then take it off. Goggles, particulates, dust materials. You should be using these with the liquids. This is a face shield that you should be using. If you wear glasses, this is a problem. And so when I spray, I've actually got some goggles that are like the sunglasses you put over, because without these, I can't see a thing. I mean, I can tell you it's a corn plant, but I can't tell you what's on the corn without them. So I have a pair of those. So that is something you can do if you have to wear glasses. We do not recommend that you use contacts, especially the soft ones, because there may be something in the product that if it gets in your eyes, that causes problems with the contacts adhering, which you don't want to have. Respirators. I think we all know what respirators are for. Okay, we've had enough of that. This is not one you want to wear. Okay, this is a nuisance dust mask. You can go to one of the hardware stores and buy 100 of them for about $15. Okay, for pesticides, they are useless. Okay, they do not filter out the particle size that they need to filter out. And so this shouldn't be used. This is a particulate dust mask. This actually is a respirator, okay? And it will filter out the material that we want it to filter out, but we do not recommend it for use for pesticides. And that's because these things don't give you a good enough fit on your face to keep everything out. So if you talk, you get gaps, and that's potential, or there's that kind of, so they're a little more expensive. The technology is just as good as what's in the regular respirators. It's just how well does it fit? Right? And I definitely couldn't wear one of these because I've got a beard. You can't have facial hair and get a good seal, even with the better ones. Okay? Which these are. Most people, if they're gonna wear one, they're using these half mask types, and there's lots of different types. So they come with pre-filters. That's for people that are using powders, wearable powders, because of the dust potential, and also with their liquids. And so there's different kinds of filters. And here you got the cartridge that just goes over the top of it. There are full face ones out there, so you get the face protection and respirator protection at the same time. These are purifying respirators. I don't see a lot of use of these. I have seen them in greenhouses just because of the way ventilation is, and it's moving stuff around. And so these, there's almost no exposure because of the way they work. I said no mask. So this is data that's generated with a mannequin that's fitted with no respirator or a different type of respirator. It's hooked up to a machine that pulls air through it, and then it has a particle counter to tell you how many particles are getting through. And so that's when they do this in where I got this data from. That was the average if you didn't have a mask on. You put on that nuisance dust mask, it didn't get a whole lot better. Okay. It gets a little bit better if you have that particulate, it drops, but nowhere near what you get with the chemical cartridge. And that's because of the way it's designed and the fit. Okay. And if you wear these, actually the farmers are required to get fit tested. We do that at Rutgers. We use it in the lab. We go down to our health center and they fit it, and we have to leave it down. And again, they would tell me to take this off, and they could actually force me to do it. So when I used to wear one in the field, I would be clean shaven in the summer. And then that air purifying, if they really work well, there's a huge drop. There's almost nothing coming through. And that's basically because it's getting purified before it gets blown into the mask. Okay. You want a black cartridge, you can go and get one. So what do you use? Follow your labeling. Here's 2,4-D. If you look at the label, it says wear rubber gloves and goggles when you're using material. Okay, and so again, that's on the label. We need to do it. Consider what kind of equipment you're using. And so this is a granular spreader, but he's up on here, so it's not walking through it. We've got a person here that's doing a liquid application, so you need to think about how that's getting applied and what's best to protect yourself. Minimum clothing that I mentioned: gloves, long sleeves, long pants, and waterproof gear. That's the bare minimum. You can also do it based on signal word, and as you see here, the more toxic it is, the more you add. And actually, the more toxic it is, that'll be on the label. And again, if it's on the label, you're required to wear it. Storage areas. I'm not sure I need to do this one, so I'm gonna go through this really fast. Okay. They do have to have a sign. This doesn't make it. You could say pesticides, and then it's fine. And so disposal, let's do this one. That's the Webster's definition of what waste is. In terms of pesticides, it's leftover product, it's leftover spray material, rinse safe, and empty containers. And so let's start with leftover product. I don't have a lot of good options. I tell people, if you only need a couple of ounces, don't buy 2 gallons. Because it'll sit there for the next 20 years. And if it's like my parents, when finally got rid of the house, because my mom passed away, I had all of this stuff I had to get rid of. And that can become a problem. It wasn't her fault, it was my father. Well, he sold agricultural chemicals for a living, so even when, you know, this was like 2010, there were still bags of DDT in the garage that he would pull out every once in a while. So, you know, only buy what you need. If you have leftover, the best thing is to put it in a spray tank and spray it out where it's labeled. DEP and EPA will tell you that's the most environmental friendly thing to do with it because that's where it's designed to go. Okay. And then give it to somebody else to use. This is for the landscapers. And they chuckle when they see the free of charge. A lot of the products they're using are several $100s a gallon. And so they don't like that, but if they sell it to somebody and it's a restricted use material, they have to have a special license just to be able to do that. So, you know, somebody got inspected, they might rat them out, I guess. Hazardous waste generator, we do this at Rutgers with materials, and we also do it with lab materials. You have to know what it is. So during my career, I walked into grower spray sheds and they have a 50-gallon drum. And they say, I think it's DDT. And there's no label, there's nothing. They can't get rid of that until they get it identified. So they have to hire a lab to come in and take a sample, and they go back to the lab, figure out what it is. It can cost a lot of money to do that, especially if we can't kind of narrow it in for them. And then once you know what it is, you can use a hauler to get rid of it. And that's not cheap. County hazardous waste collection days are great for homeowners. I do this with my leftover materials too. I don't use a lot of stuff, but I do have weed on. And sometimes it sits in my garage for a couple of years and I know it's not good anymore. So as long as it's in an original container with a label, I can put that in the back of my car, go to the disposal day, and they will take it. They will also allow farmers to do that. They will not usually allow commercial applicators to do that. It's just for homeowners and the farmers. And so it's a great program. Empty containers, we used to be able to burn them. We do bury them if you do the process, because if you put it in your trash, it's probably going to a landfill that can handle it. We don't want them to reuse them. Okay. That's a problem if you have a container that there's no labeling on it and somebody picks it up and fills it up with water and takes it out to the field. Okay, for drinking purposes. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen sometimes. Triple rinse or power rinse, that's just basically it's a nozzle on a hose. It's got a spike in it. You punch a hole in the side, put the cap on, turn it on, and the power rinses the inside. And it'll rinse all the residues out. It also puts the hole in, which is great. We really want that hole in there. And so triple rinsing and the power rinsing, they've also looked at this and 99% of the residues are gone. And so it's essentially clean. Here's the landfill that all of our counties have access to. Recycling. There's a lot of states that allow the recycling of pesticide containers. New Jersey isn't as good as a lot of other ones. And basically they recycle them and they make things like new pesticide containers out. And so it's a good program. We used to have a landfill in South Jersey that would take them. There aren't a lot now. I know my township doesn't want them for recycling purposes. And I think a lot of townships are like that. The Department of Ag, though, does have a program for the farmers, where they have locations around the state that as long as they will attest to having triple rinsed it, they can bring it to that site, put it in a bin, and a couple of times a year, a company comes, picks them up, takes them away, and makes new stuff out of them. So we do have a small program, but not like we do in other states. What do you do with leftover spray material? Use it up? Perfect answer. Yeah, you don't wanna do this. Okay? You don't wanna do this, okay? This actually today has labeling on it, that says do not put anything in here, because it goes to a water source. And that's what it says today, okay? And that's because it goes there. A little creek that goes out to the woods behind my house. And, I got this idea because my neighbor across the street also has one, and they're connected. I'm the end point in the whole subdivision. And he was having his house painted, and I watched the brushes dumped down, and that turned white. Aha. Not only went and told him he shouldn't do that, that was an idea for slides. Of course, we don't want to put it in there directly. And again, I don't have good options. Put it out on a labeled site. Cleanup. Hopefully, if you use the hose end sprayer or you're using a little hand sprayer, you clean it out every once in a while. The question then becomes, what do you do with the rinsing? Again, you alluded it to the point, it shouldn't be a problem. You can put it back in and take it out and spray it someplace where it's designed to go. And with that, I'll end and take any questions that we still might have.
All right there, George.
Any other questions? Okay, so one thing I think we wanted me to talk about was the licensing program.
So, yes, we had, but just to preface why, we had someone call into the secretary reception downstairs about fertilizer in New Jersey. You had mentioned that
Right.
fertilizers
Okay,
need pesticide license. Well, I didn't know that the ProFact, so what's the difference between, when you
Okay.
hear these terms, ProFact
Right.
report?
ProFax is a program, there's a state law that says that all the landscapers have to have a fertilizer license. Put those materials down, and it's because of things like runoff in rainstorms off the grass and getting into water systems, and so they have a training program. The training program is different from what they have to do to get a pesticide license. So the ProFax is run by Rutgers. And so it's a website, you go in, you log in, you go, it's virtual. You go through all the material, you take an exam at the end, and if you pass it, you get your license. They then have to, and there was some credits for it given at the meeting that was referenced we were at yesterday, where they attend the meeting and there's somebody up there talking about fertilizers. And you could include things like ways to avoid runoff and those kinds of things, and they get credits for that. So it is a state law. DEP doesn't have anything to do with it. It's all run through the university. Now, for the landscapers and the pest control people and the mosquito joes and all those other commercial folks and the farmers, they all have to have a license to be able to apply any pesticide. Okay, it used to be just a restricted use, but now it's anything. So if you walk into a garden center and you bought a bottle of 7, you don't need a license, they do. Okay, to be able to use it. And so they have that's a program with the farmers. There's a study manual that they study that actually comes out of my office. And then they go online at Rutgers and continuing ed, they pay their fee, they take their exam, and if they pass it, DEP gets notified and they send them a license. That license is good for 5 years. And during that, they have to go through a re-education program where like yesterday, the nurserymen that were in there, they all have licenses and they got credits towards that re-education program. If they don't fulfill it, and it's not that hard, they have to have 2 core credits, which is basically me talking for an hour at the meeting. And then 16 category credits. So you get 1 credit for every half an hour. So if they go every year, after 5 years, they should be all set. If they're not, they have to go and retake the exams all over again, start from scratch. The commercial folks have to do the same thing. Okay. The only difference is during the training program, they're all required to take a basic safety class before they're even eligible to start studying and taking the exams that they have to take. And the companies also have to put them through 40 hours of on-the-job training. So they know how to use the equipment, clean the equipment, measure out materials properly and all sorts of other things. Again, once they get the license, I've had mine since 1986. Because I talk at all the meetings, so it's easy, but I've gone through the program. Okay. And so during COVID, I lost one of my categories because nobody gave me credits. I don't need it anymore, so I'm not going back and getting it. But as long as you do it, you can be licensed forever. And so, it's a good program. That one is managed by DEP. They do have inspectors. They do come out and they inspect farms to make sure they're doing everything that they're supposed to. They do the commercial companies as well. In some counties, I don't know if Ocean's one of them, the local health department gets involved as well. They get grants from DEP for their inspectors to, if they're driving through a neighborhood and they see a landscaper and they think they may be applying pesticides, that they have the ability to stop and do an on-site inspection at that moment.
You gotta need to be helpful.
Yeah, that's the health department. But again, it's not all of them, and it changes every year, depending on who submits a grant, saying that they will do that. One of the easiest ways that they know to stop is if the landscape truck doesn't have a business license on it. And they all have to register their business with DEP. It's a 9,000 number that's supposed to be there. So if they don't see that, they'll stop. And they do that because unregistered businesses is the #1 violation in the state for every year for the last 30 years that I've been doing this. There's a lot of people out there trying to not have to do all of that.
And I think that's why I wanted to bring it up, because I don't know as homeowners or, you know, what is actually, you know, there is a lot of training that does go in with pesticides. So people don't want us to use pesticides. I get it, but you know, sometimes there are conditions you have to, one health, we've gone through all that. So having, you know, knowing who should be licensed and who shouldn't is something that you may encounter as master gardeners.
Anybody that is offering services to you to control pests using pesticides, they need to have at least one licensed applicator working for the company. Okay. For the people that actually come and do that don't have to have a license, but we have a subcategory, it's called an operator registration. They've had all the training, they just don't take any state exams to get the license. If they have that, the company can send them out to a job site without having to have a licensed applicator there. If they don't, there has to be somebody there. The only exception is for termite applications. There has to be a licensed applicator there just because of what they do. Although most of them use the baits. You have a question?
Oh, yes. If you're using a concentrate like neem oil and mix it with it in a sprayer, do you need to get rid of the remaining product every day, or can you keep using it for a few weeks?
Okay, that's basically a question about shelf life. There is absolutely no information on a label about shelf life. I would say that if you make up a solution of neem, you probably can hold it for a short period of time. You might want to think about what time of year it is. Of course, you won't be doing it in the winter time, but in the summer, if it's like 90 degrees and your garage, which is probably where you might keep it, or your shed gets 90 degrees, some of these materials, and I can't tell you exactly for neem, I'd have to look it up. The heat actually degrades the materials. But I'd say that if it wasn't over 90 degrees, you could probably keep it for a short period of time.
That's a good question, because you know, like you
Yes.
say, you make it and what do you do?
Right.
And I am the person that's done it with no gloves.
And sometimes the labels will say, don't allow it to freeze, or they'll say, don't store it at temperatures above 90 degrees. Because they want you to know that it's going to degrade.
I believe for my master gardeners, I don't know if Diane, if you did it for yours, we have other resources on Canvas that we use. Pat gave us a whole homeowner pesticide sheet. I know I have it for my group. If you don't have it, I can give it to you if it's not on yours.
Yeah, I'll hand it out.
Okay, because I know you had it from probably last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of great EPA information, different websites if you're looking for, definitely for the pesticides and.
Yeah, and Pat and I also have a website,
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
real easy, pestmanagement.rutgers.edu.
that's good. That's a good one. That should have been up
One
there.
more question about.
Yeah.
So you said you have Weed Be Gone, right?
Yes.
So you use it.
Yeah.
And you take it to your local, like wherever you live and they dispose the bottle
I
for
just
you?
throw it in my trash.
You throw it in your trash?
Yeah.
Okay.
As a homeowner, you're allowed to.
Yeah.
You don't recycle it?
They won't take it.
Oh,
The only program that I'm aware of, the Cumberland County used to take them, is the one the Department of Ag runs, and it's for the farmers. So they can bring those in, and the Department of Ag has a company come and take them away.
I know, Ocean County runs a hazardous waste because I cleaned out a friend's shed in October and they still had glass bottles of chlordane, lindane. Yeah, glass bottles, no less. So she had them in there for since 1970. I took it to the hazardous waste, so I had to call the town and I had to wait until the following spring, though. They only do it 2 times a year and it had to be labeled.
Yes.
It had to have a label on it, otherwise they wouldn't take it. And it was full, whatever was in there, so as a homeowner legally, they were saying you could throw it in the trash, not the linding. I knew that was just something you didn't want to do.
Right.
But, your roundups and your containers now, but, if you want to be conscientious, do it in your hazardous waste.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And they'll take lots of other things too. I do,
Paint.
they'll take paint, I do woodworking, they'll take containers that still have varnish in it, that's gotten all.
Oil, sometimes you have to check that.
Yeah. So they're good programs.
Any other questions in particular?
Question, how do you get rid of the little gnats in your indoor plants?
Your fungus gnats?
Okay,
Wait for
Um,
the house plant.
so
You don't want to talk about it.
there is, okay, so the little gnats, those are probably fungus gnats. And so they lay their eggs in the soil and the larvae like really moist environments and they're feeding on the roots of the plants. And then all of a sudden you see all these gnats flying around. There's 2 products that you can use that work really well. There's a product out there, it's a nematode that is sold, and I think it's called Natural. And you mix it and you use it as a drench. You water the soil, in the pot with it, and that will take care of it. And then there's also a BT strain that you do a very similar thing with it, and it'll work as well. The Natural is probably going to be easier to find. Okay, but if you can go online. Both products should be registered with DEP for sale in the state. So if they are, you can go online and they'll ship it to you. If it's not, they shouldn't ship it to you.
So there's a couple of things I just wanted to make comment to for master gardeners. If your neighbor buys anything at Home Depot, but asks you to spray it, whether you're a master gardener, it's illegal.
Yeah.
Because you're not the homeowner and you are not doing it on your property. You cannot do it on your neighbor's property. So the homeowner needs to do it. I get that question. Oh, I'll just have my son come over. Legally, it has to be the actual person living on the property. All right, so be careful of that. Also, community gardens, which will come up at any time. If you're spraying in community gardens, you do not have a license. Technically, you should not be spraying, even if it's insecticidal soaps. You're not a pesticide sprayer. So be very cautious if you are in those situations. Also, community gardens, if you're using in your garden, that might be fine. And those they want to know what was sprayed in the area because we've seen it, the drift. Somebody sprays here and then the neighbor next door, their plants are gone because it went too far. So that's the biggest one. You'll also get the lovely question of, my neighbor's out to sabotage me. They poured this stuff on these and they're dead. Look at the area. The dogs keep peeing on it. It's right on the corner. I mean, there's so many different reasons. So as you'll hear, don't jump to conclusions. Find out we're only seeing a little piece of whatever they're bringing us. Sometimes it is a little piece. You can't make a judgment about what's going on. You can make some speculations, but
My suggestion with the insects, get them to send you a sample of the actual insect. Don't accept the picture. We get a lot of them in my department and most of them we can't tell at all what it is.
But they're so tiny.
Phones don't take pictures. So yeah, we can get a sample.
Yeah, and then anything like we're saying with a fungal or anything, if it's a plant material that's got a fungus, try, and you don't know what it is, whether it's, I don't care who it is, send it up to the Rutgers lab to get it analyzed if it's something you really, really want to treat. Otherwise, if it's a single plant, rip it up and put something else that's not in that same family. Easiest way to keep it, and that's what most homeowners are gonna look for. All right,
One more.
Sure.
What about where they're spraying or dropping predator mites from drones, to treat, thrips, and such? Any thoughts on that at all? I mean, it's,
Okay.
I know, I mean, they're using the drones. It's a bit.
yeah.
Okay, well. Yes, I know that's going on. I haven't heard this one.
Okay.
But they are, in fact, I have friends at the University of West Virginia that have developed systems to drop natural enemies in places where they can't get to. Okay, so it wouldn't surprise me that they're now, somebody's got the idea to do this. I can't comment on how effective it's going to be. But you know, we do that in the greenhouse with a little shaker that you buy them. So they do work.
Right.
I just don't have any.
Right. I was watching it on
experience.
YouTube. That's how I found out.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes, yeah.
It was a large
Well-
garden center that was trying it.
Very quickly, you may be starting to get questions about can they apply pesticides with a drone here in the state? They can't quite do it yet, but that's coming.
Yeah, so they can't, if you didn't hear it, just because I know down here, we took your mic.
Right.
You cannot in the state of New Jersey just yet use drones to put down products. It is not, it's coming maybe, but it's not,
It's coming.
yeah, it's just not, it's not approved at this point.
They were waiting, so we have a state law that says you can't fly anything using aircraft. Unless it says on the label, it's legal to do that.
Diane, can you
Labels say anything about drones, and so. trying to decide
Oh, enjoy it.
actually classify aircraft.
So thank you, everybody, for coming. If anybody wants to take goodie at home with you, you're welcome. Otherwise, we have a transfer meeting at the end.
They have to come out with a- lawyers.
They were using the predators.
Right.
Particularly with the predator mites, they were taking out a lot of the mites while they were trying to get. Different, predators for different